Little Yu, this place. She had long heard from Chu Luiyue that this illusory god palace was exactly the same as the pavilion in the sky that appeared in the Red Moon Desert. Therefore, before coming, she had already mentally prepared herself. However, when she arrived here and saw the palace that truly existed, she still felt very strange. She thought for a moment and couldn't help but ask in a low voice. Little Yu, have you tried going in? Chu Luiyue shook her head. No. It's also my first time here. Suli looked at her, a trace of light flickering in her eyes. Since you were able to directly enter at that time, perhaps, it's the same here. Chu Luiyue's heart moved. Actually, she had thought of this before. After all, from the beginning, everything in the illusory god palace seemed to be against her. However, she didn't have any plans to try it for the time being. There were so many people in the illusory god palace. She didn't know how many pairs of eyes were staring at this place. If she really went in directly, it would cause a lot of trouble. That wasn't what she wanted to see right now. Therefore, for the sake of caution, she still chose to pass by. Suli saw the change in her expression and instantly understood something. Then, I'll go in and take a look first. Chu Luiyue gently nodded. Suli took a few steps forward and stretched out her hand. The moment her palm touched the door, she immediately felt that there was a gaze sweeping across her body. At this moment, it was as if her entire person was seen through. Suli calmed down and exerted force on her hand. Creak, the door opened. She turned her gaze slightly and looked at Chu Luiyue. I'm going in. Mr. Su, please be careful. Suli nodded and walked in without hesitation. Then, the door closed again. Chu Luiyue stared at the door for a while and turned to leave. At this moment, a slight fluctuation suddenly came from her dantian. For some reason, the water droplet floating quietly in his dantian started to ripple. Chu Luiyue's heart tightened and immediately suppressed it. She quickly turned around to take a look. Just now, there seemed to be a force that was calling her. She slowly clenched her hands in her sleeves and stood there waiting for a while. Seeing that nothing was wrong, she left. At the same time, in front of the empty black jade square, a figure suddenly appeared. It was the second messenger of God, Yu Qian. His expression was slightly serious as he stared at the black jade square in front of him. His eyes seemed to be surging with waves. He had only left for a short while and there was actually such a commotion here. Could it be? At this moment, light footsteps came from behind him. He immediately turned around to look. His eyes were extremely sharp, like a cold light piercing through. Suli stopped in her tracks and looked at the man who suddenly appeared in front of her. Her heart was in her throat. This man was extremely dangerous. Moreover, he seemed to be extremely hostile towards her. However, she had only just arrived and had not even seen the other party. Where did this hostility come from? Who are you? Yu Qian asked in a low voice. Suli suppressed her emotions and looked calm on the surface. She nodded and bowed. Her voice was calm and gentle. Suli, Yu Qian frowned and his eyes swept across her face. Finally, his gaze fell on the letter at her waist. Are you new? Yes. Yu Qian stared at her for a long time before slowly saying. Refining saint. Suli was shocked. Refining saints were different from martial artists. Their cultivation level was hidden very deeply. Outsiders basically could not see it. However, this man only looked at her for a while and guessed it directly. Yes. She nodded. The trace of worry in Yu Qian's heart disappeared. All the refining saints in the world had an inseparable close relationship with the palace of the illusory god. This meant that the fluctuation just now was caused by her. Go southwest. The fifth messenger of God will be in charge. Suli felt that the dangerous aura of the other party disappeared in an instant. She was puzzled, but she did not ask. Thank you, messenger of God. Although she did not know the other party's ranking, in the palace of the illusory god, to have such an aura, it must be the messenger of God. Yu Qian had already looked at the black jade square again. The flame at the top of the white jade pillar was much dimmer than before. He frowned. Digression, today, I have to go out and try to get to 6:00. Chapter 2265. On the other side, Chang Wanzhou had already brought his men back to his residence. Due to the arrival of Rong Xiao and the others, the original courtyard was no longer big enough. However, Xin Yi had already tidied up the few courtyards beside them and was waiting for them to arrive. There were many courtyards in the Illusion God Palace, and the few courtyards beside them happened to be empty, so it was convenient for them. This commotion also attracted the attention of some people. Xiao Ran was originally sitting on his roof in boredom, staring at the star path and deep in thought. When he saw Chang Wanzhou coming over with his men, he was shocked. Because he had never seen the people behind him before. On second thought, he remembered that Chu Luiyue seemed to have said that he would go back and invite the artifact refining saint over. But why were there so many people? Seeing the group of people approaching, Xiao Ran touched his chin. These people are not weak, especially the young man in front, who was dressed in snow-white clothes. He was handsome and devilish, exuding a noble aura. If I'm not wrong, he should be that girl's husband. There was also the young man in black clothes behind him. He held a sword in one hand and looked cold and indifferent. He seemed to be a follower, but he had already broken through to the god realm. Xiao Ran was suddenly stunned and stared at Yan Qing a few more times. This person. Why does he look so familiar, as if I've seen him somewhere before? He frowned slightly and kept searching in his mind, but he couldn't find an answer. However, that familiar feeling lingered in his mind. At this moment, Yan Qing sensed his gaze and looked over. His facial features were handsome, but there was a faint coldness in his eyes. He was like a moving iceberg. In just an instant, Yan Qing retracted his gaze. Xiao Ran touched his chin. This person. I've never seen him before. Perhaps it was just my imagination. While Xiao Ran was secretly conflicted, Rong Xiao and the others had already arrived. Xin Yi was already waiting at the door. When he saw Rong Xiao and the others, he nodded slightly and bowed. Your Highness. Rong Xiao's gaze swept past him as he nodded and walked in. Xiao Ran didn't withdraw his gaze until all of them had entered the room. He frowned slightly. No matter how he looked at it, there didn't seem to be a problem. But, bang! Suddenly, there was a loud explosion. Xiao Ran quickly raised his eyes to look over, only to see a silver stream of light soaring into the sky from the star passage. It quickly transformed into a profound formation in midair. Someone else is taking the star path. Xiao Ran's heart skipped a beat. He instantly soared into the air and looked over. When he saw it, he was overjoyed. Wasn't the woman who was currently standing on the star passage breaking the profound formation Chu Luiyue? She had just brought people back, and she was already trying to break the Xian formation. Isn't this a little too efficient? Just as Xiao Ran was thinking about this, he saw another ray of light fly up. Another Xian formation was successfully activated. He was taken aback. Little girl, how can you be so fast? The commotion on the star passage quickly attracted the attention of the other people in the illusory god palace. When they discovered that this person was still Chu Luiyue, many people were rather surprised. Isn't that Sheng Wanyu? Why is she taking the star path again so quickly? It seems like only half a month has passed since she turned back halfway. In such a short time, she has already comprehended the profound formation of the Great Xian Emperor Division. TSK. She has already activated 2 profound formations consecutively. It's probably not right to say that she has only broken one, right? Other things aside, her talent as a Xian master is indeed very shocking. I wonder how far she can go this time. She probably came because she has a certain level of confidence. However, the number of profound formations in the Great Xian Emperor division is not small. She has only deciphered less than 1/10 of them. She might be able to walk for a while, but it probably won't be too long. Everyone had different opinions about Chu Liuyue's actions. Some were looking forward to it, while others disagreed. Chu Liyue, who was standing on the star path, automatically ignored all these voices. She had originally planned to continue walking the star path after inviting Su Li over. To the current her, these profound formations of the Great Xian Emperor division were no longer of any difficulty. The key was whether Su Li could find some information on her side. And during this period of time, she also planned to walk forward as much as possible. This way, if something happened, she could openly enter the illusory god palace with the fastest speed possible. With this thought, she lightly waved her hands in front of her. Several streams of light flew out and intertwined with each other. Not long after, another profound formation was deciphered. She took a step forward and continued forward. Time slowly passed. The number of onlookers also increased. Gradually, they finally realized that Chu Liyue did not seem to have returned on a whim because she had deciphered a few profound formations at the last moment. She had clearly made preparations long ago. Seeing her decipher profound formations one after another and easily activate them, everyone's attitude rapidly changed. These profound formations of the Great Xian Emperor division are not simple. She actually managed to draw them so smoothly and easily. In the crowd, someone could not help but mutter in a low voice, unable to conceal the shock in his voice. Previously, although her performance was very outstanding, most of those were profound formations of the Great Xian Emperor division. It was not that no one in the illusory god palace could do it, but it might take a little longer. But this time was different. The difficulty of the profound formations of the Great Xian Emperor division had increased by more than a little. Even if she had not rested during this period of time to study these, it should not be so heaven-defying, right? Mu Yafing had also arrived at some point in time. However, she did not go to the very front and only chose a hidden corner to wait. From where she stood, she could see that Chu Liyue was following the star path and was slowly approaching here. She was also getting closer and closer to the illusory god palace. When she looked carefully, she could even see the calmness in Chu Liyue's eyes. It was very clear that these profound formations of the Great Xian Emperor division that others found difficult to decipher did not pose any threat to her at all. Along the way, she had already activated more than 10 profound formations continuously without stopping to rest. But there was not the slightest bit of fatigue on her face. It seemed like she was just strolling leisurely. Mu Yafing gritted her teeth. A few voices of discussion came from the side. Don't you guys feel that Shengwan Yu seems to be very relaxed when walking this segment of the star path? You think so too? I thought I was the only one who felt that way. From the beginning until now, how long has it been? She hasn't stuttered even once. The time she spent on each profound formation is very short. Even Mu Yafing did not reach this level back then. Mu Yafing can't compare to Shengwan Yu, right? She broke her record the last time. Sigh, if not for the fact that Shengwan Yu just came to the illusory god palace, I would have thought that she had already seen these profound formations. There seemed to be a ball of fire burning in Mu Yafing's chest. She suddenly said, "How do you know that she hasn't seen them before?" Chapter 2266. Hearing her voice, those people turned their heads and looked over. They hadn't noticed it before, but now that Mu Yafing took the initiative to speak, they realized that she had come here without them knowing. They immediately became nervous. Did she hear what they said just now? No matter what, Mu Yafeng was the most promising Xian master in the illusory god palace to complete the Star Road. Now that someone was performing better than her, how could she feel good? They looked at each other, and one of them finally couldn't help but ask. Mu Yafeng, what do you mean by that? Could it be that Sheng Guanyu has really seen these Xian formations? That's impossible. How long has she been in the illusory god palace? And this is her first time coming to this place on the Star Road. It's not good to say such things, right? Another person said softly. Mu Yafeng smiled coldly. What's there to not say? When she passed by the Xian King teacher's Xian formation, didn't she say that she had seen a portion of it before? They choked. Chu Luyue did say that, but those Xian formations weren't very high level. Those who had some background in the divine ruins world might have seen many of them. There was nothing much to say about that. But the Xian King teacher's Xian formation was different. In the world, there was no place with more high-level Xian formations than the illusory god palace. Even if she had seen them before, it was at most a portion. It was absolutely impossible for her to see all of them, let alone cover all the Xian formations on the Star Road. Do you really think that there's someone in this world who can instantly comprehend the Xian formations of the great Xian King teacher with just a glance? Mu Yafeng said softly with a calm expression. Their expressions changed. What do you mean by that? That's right. No matter how talented Chu Luyue was, she shouldn't be so heaven-defying. If this continued, she could almost tie with the seventh divine emissary, right? One had to know that even the seventh divine emissary spent hundreds of years to complete the Star Road. This was also why he could become the seventh divine emissary. How long had Chu Luyue been here? Wasn't this going too smoothly? Mu Yafeng said. I don't mean anything. Everyone has sharp eyes, and I don't need to say anything. These words made people even more suspicious. Suddenly, a young man beside him seemed to have thought of something. Oh, right. I remember that Sheng Guanyu has a good relationship with Zhenbao Pavilion. Lord Ji seemed to have personally looked for her and invited her to the treasure pavilion. As soon as these words were spoken, it immediately caused quite a commotion. Really? Did His Excellency personally invite him? What kind of status does Lord Ji have? Why would he be so courteous to her? But she doesn't have a bloodline totem. Logically speaking, this shouldn't be the case, right? Of course it's true. I'm not the only one who saw it that day. Wait, did you forget that the treasure pavilion still has a copy of the mythical flame diagram? Could it be that she saw this? The crowd fell silent for a moment. They knew very well what the mythical flame diagram was. If that was the case, it wouldn't be difficult to explain all of this. However, there was another problem. The mythical diagram of flame is so precious. How can Sheng Guanyu be qualified to read it? You want to buy it? That was impossible. Even a well-known figure like Mu Yafeng, who had been accumulating wealth for many years, didn't have enough capital to buy it. Needless to say, the others didn't. Could it be that His Excellency Ji is behind this? Someone whispered, but halfway through, he was suddenly interrupted. I say, what's the point of guessing here and there? Everyone, including Mu Yafeng, was shocked and turned around to look. Xiao Ran had appeared not far behind them. At this moment, he was leaning lazily against the wall with his arms crossed. He looked at them with a half-smile. Anyway, His Excellency Mingshu spends most of his time in the treasure pavilion. Isn't it better for you to go over and ask him? Everyone was speechless. His Excellency Mingshu always looked amiable, but everyone knew that he was not to be trifled with. Even the eighth divine envoy was not afraid of the treasure pavilion, let alone them. If they went over now, wouldn't they be making trouble for themselves? When Mu Yafeng saw Xiao Ran, a trace of fear flashed across her eyes. However, at this moment, Xiao Ran suddenly looked over. Mu Yafeng. The corners of his lips curled up. Others may not know why Sheng Wanyu was able to progress so smoothly on the Star Road, but don't you know? Mu Yafeng's lips instantly turned pale. The people beside her looked at Mu Yafeng and then at Xiao Ran in confusion. What was he hinting at? However, Xiao Ran didn't say anything else. He turned his gaze and looked at Chu Luyue. Actually, he was also very curious. How far could she go this time? Mu Yafeng clenched her fists and shut her mouth. The fact that Chu Luyue was copying Xian formations for the treasure pavilion was considered a secret. If this was said by Chu Luyue or the treasure pavilion, it wouldn't be a big deal. However, if it was said by her, it was different. Although she was very unhappy with the fact that the treasure pavilion was biased towards Chu Luyue, she wasn't stupid enough to offend them publicly. While he was arguing, Chu Luyue had already cracked 3 more Xian formations. Many people were bewildered when they saw her stubbornly moving forward. Where can she go? Rong Xiao stood in the courtyard and looked up slightly. He could see the silver stream of light rushing into the sky. Xian formations quickly condensed and dissipated, and the distance kept moving forward. Obviously, she was getting closer and closer to the illusory god palace. Sheng Wanjing walked out of the house and lowered his eyes, as if in deep thought. He had just asked Tang Ke some questions. Ever since he saw Kong Qinglin break through to the weapon-refining saint realm with his own eyes, he vaguely felt that he was closer to that threshold. However, a little bit was still a little bit. Fortunately, Tang Ke was also here and gave him a lot of advice. He felt that he had comprehended something, but he was still lacking something to break through the window paper. Seeing Rong Xiao standing in the courtyard, he raised his voice and said, "Rong Xiao, you've just arrived at the illusory god palace. Why don't you walk around?" Chapter 2267. Hearing this, Rong Xiao looked back and smiled faintly. "Since I'm already here, there's no need to rush." Seeing that he was calm and composed, Sheng Wanjing was also relieved. Rong Xiao was extremely talented and resourceful. He probably already had his own plans and didn't need others to worry about him. Following his line of sight, Sheng Wanjing smiled. "It seems that you is going quite well." Rong Xiao nodded slightly. Yes. Those Xian formations were indeed nothing to her. Sheng Wanjing waved his hand. "Keep an eye on that girl and tell her not to be so anxious. I'll go into seclusion for the next few days." Previously, when Chu Luyue wasn't here, he had been carefully watching over this group of people. Now that Rong Xiao was here, he could finally free up some time. Rong Xiao's thin lips curled slightly. "Don't worry." Only then did Sheng Wanjing return to his room. Illusory God Palace. Jin Yunlai walked out of the door and looked into the distance. She's continuing. The commotion on the Star Road wasn't small. It was hard for him not to know. After staring for a while, Jin Yunlai's expression gradually became serious. Chu Liuyue's speed was much faster than he expected. It seems that she's really obtained the mythical flame diagram. Jin Yunlai murmured softly. Previously, Mu Yafeng only sent a message saying that Treasure Pavilion had asked Chu Luyue to copy the Xian formations on the 2nd floor. But at that time, he wasn't sure which ones were which. But now, everything couldn't be clearer. If she hadn't read the mythical flame diagram, she wouldn't have been able to go so smoothly on the Star Road. It seems that Treasure Pavilion really values her. They're even willing to part with this thing. Jin Yunlai frowned slightly. But he was still puzzled. Because even so, she shouldn't be so fast. The further she went, the more complicated and difficult the profound formations became. However, her speed was not affected at all. This almost made people suspect that she had already memorized all the Xian formations in the entire Xian formation in her mind. But, how is this possible? No matter how high her comprehension ability was, it shouldn't be this fast. Perhaps I should find a time to talk to Chu Luyue. At this moment, a familiar fluctuation came from the front. Jin Yunlai's heart tightened. Then, a figure appeared in the void. The enchanting book and the crimson golden feather also flew out. Jin Yunlai quickly caught the item. Lord Yumo, why are you back so soon? He had thought that he would have to wait for several days. Umo smiled faintly. The Celestial Emperor already knows the names on the list. Naturally, it won't take long. What's more, the gate of heaven was still open, and there were many things that the seventh divine emissary had to take care of. Jin Yunlai said respectfully. Yes. This was probably the Celestial Emperor's order. If the Celestial Emperor has any other orders, I will inform you. Umo said. Jin Yunlai responded. Suddenly, he thought of something and asked. Lord Umo, wasn't it Lord Yen Qing who was in charge of the palace of the illusory god? Why was it suddenly changed to Umo? Umo said faintly. Seventh divine emissary, this kind of thing shouldn't concern you, right? Jin Yunlai was shocked. Only then did he realize that he had crossed the line and immediately took half a step back. Lord Umo, please forgive me. I didn't mean to offend you. Umo stared at him for a while. It's good that you know. After saying that, he turned and left. After a long time, Jin Yunlai let out a long sigh. Chapter 2268. Herb Mountain. Compared to the past, this place was much livelier now. Ever since Xu Jing was reprimanded in public and abolished many of the rules she had set, the celestial physician of the illusionary god palace was no longer restrained and could freely come and go to Herb Mountain. When Xu Jing arrived, she saw such a scene. She looked around and saw that almost every mountain was crowded with people. All kinds of medicinal herbs were constantly being picked. Although this was not the first time she had seen this scene, Xu Jing's heart still skipped a beat. In the past, if these people wanted to get these things, they would have to put in a lot of effort and try to curry favor with her. But now, they no longer put her in their eyes. Even when a few people walked past her, they only greeted her with a simple salute and left quickly. If it was in the past, Xu Jing took a deep breath and suppressed all the messy thoughts in her mind. Now that things had become like this, it was useless for her to think more. She did not want to give up the position of the eighth divine envoy. However, at this moment, she glanced out of the corner of her eye and suddenly saw many people heading towards a certain mountain peak. She was in a daze when she saw a woman leisurely walking over from afar. She was wearing a colorful dress, and her black hair fluttered in the wind. Her graceful figure was fully displayed as she moved. The colorful string on her wrist was decorated with small jade fragments. She only needed to lift her hand slightly to tuck her hair behind her ear, and the sound of the bracelet could be heard. Xu Jing's face immediately turned cold. Those people were obviously heading towards that woman. Miss Little Hachi, we meet again. What a coincidence. Ha ha ha. Miss Little Hachi, did you bring back enough medicinal herbs last time? What have you taken a fancy to today? Why don't I help you look? Miss Little Hachi, I heard that you are quite interested and talented in refining medicine. Why don't we exchange pointers when we have time? How about it? Extremely earnest voices could be heard one after another. Many young men came to Little Hachi's side with eager faces. Little Hachi plucked an ice lotus and smiled lazily. I've been coming here every day recently, so it's not a coincidence that we've run into each other. Also, there are so many medicinal herbs here, I can take whatever I like. As for sparring. She blinked, and her thick and long eyelashes trembled slightly. Her beautiful eyes were flowing with light, and it was especially alluring. I'm not that free. Most of these people were only grand physicians. How could they compare notes with her? If she had the time, she might as well go back and continue refining pills. Ever since she broke through to senior doctor, Big Brother really knew how to squeeze her dry. Thinking of this, she sighed sadly and resentfully. Besides, I've been very tired recently. Everyone was originally embarrassed by her words, but when they saw her frown, they all felt sorry for her. If that's the case, we won't disturb you any further. That's right, that's right. Little Hatchie, go back and rest as soon as you're done. Finally, it was quiet. Little 8 blinked his eyes and smiled in satisfaction. Then, he leisurely picked some herbs. These people were really interesting. Previously, because she had offended the 8th divine envoy, none of them dared to say a word. Now that the situation had reversed, they were no longer afraid and followed her. After choosing, she prepared to leave. However, just as she turned around, she felt a gaze that could not be considered kind fall on her. She stopped in her tracks and looked up. Then, she smiled. 8th divine envoy, it's been a long time. Shu Jing did not want to pay much attention to her, but seeing the smile on her face, he felt that it was especially dazzling. Although the herb mountain is open now, the herbs inside are especially precious. If you can't make good use of them, it's better not to take so much. It's more appropriate to leave things for others who need them more. Little Hatchie was stunned. 8th divine envoy, why do you say that? Why did this medicinal herb become a waste in my hands? Shu Jing looked at her coldly and indifferently. This woman was like a demon. All her thoughts were probably spent on her face. How could she have the time and energy to think about refining pills? With so many people disturbing you all day, you probably can't refine pills well. Shu Jing's words were tactful and sarcastic. He was just short of directly saying that little Hatchie only thought about hooking up with men every day. The expressions of many people around them changed when they heard this. No matter what, it was not nice to say such things to a girl. Unexpectedly, just when they all thought that little Hatchie was going to flip out, little Hatchie suddenly smiled. Oh, 8th divine envoy, are you talking about this? You don't have to worry about this. Although it's a little annoying sometimes, I'm already used to it. People who don't catch my eye will definitely not disturb me. It's the same no matter how many people there are. Oh, I almost forgot. 8th divine envoy, you probably haven't experienced this before. That's why you think that people's hearts are so easily swayed. She took a step forward and tilted her head to smile. 8th divine envoy, if you've seen this many times like me, you'll naturally get used to it. Shu Jing was instantly furious. This little Hatchie, was she mocking her? She was the 8th divine envoy. Of course, she could not be compared to this seductive girl. Hey, 8th divine envoy, I see that the dark circles under your eyes are getting heavier. Have you not been resting well recently? Well, if I were to be reprimanded in front of everyone, I reckon that I wouldn't be able to hold my head up high. Impudent. Hee, 8th divine envoy, don't be angry. I'm just joking with you, I've never been scolded by anyone before. Of course, I can't understand how you feel right now. If I've said something wrong, please be magnanimous and don't hold it against me. Shu Jing was already choked to the point that she could not say a word. Only a raging fire seemed to be burning in her chest. She could not wait to tear the girl in front of her apart. Little Hatchie had already waved her small hand and lifted her feet to leave. The medicinal ingredients this time are enough for a while. I'll come back after a while. 8th divine envoy, let's meet again another day. After successfully choking Shu Jing, little Hatchie was in a good mood. She happily returned to her residence. However, Before she reached her destination, she saw a person standing at the intersection. She stopped in her tracks. That person had already seen her. After hesitating for a moment, he came forward to greet her. "Miss Little Hatchie." Little Hatchie looked at him in surprise. "Liang He. Why are you here again? Didn't he run away because of her anger? Didn't he say that he would never look for her again?" "Why?" Liang He's face turned red. "Miss Little Hatchie, I was reckless that day. Please don't take it to heart. After I went back that day, I've thought about it carefully. Little Hatchie is a peerless beauty with countless admirers. I really don't have the qualifications to ask Little Hatchie to like me." He hesitated for a while before he spoke with difficulty. "Miss Little Hatchie, I've thought about it. Your proposal that day. I can accept it. Little Hatchie. Digression, in the end, a bootlicker will end up with nothing." Chapter 2269. Is Liang He crazy? The corner of Little Hatchie's mouth twitched as she took half a step back. "This isn't too good, right?" Liang He hurriedly said. "Lady Little Hatchie, I remember you said that the person you like isn't in the Illusion God Palace, right? If he doesn't come, then. Lady Little Hatchie, can you consider me for a while?" Little Hatchie took half a step back. "You mean, you want this lady to be with you first, and when he comes, you can leave?" Liang He's face was extremely embarrassed, but he still nodded. When he heard Little Eight's words that day, he was indeed extremely angry in his heart. That was why he left angrily after saying those harsh words. But these days, Little Hatchie's figure kept appearing in his mind. He couldn't sleep with anyone, and he couldn't do anything else. His entire mind was in a mess. Thus, after thinking for a while, he finally made this extremely difficult decision. Although he also felt that this was very bad, after saying it out loud, his heart felt a bit more relaxed. Of course, he also had his own plans. What kind of place was the Illusion God Palace? How could he come and go as he pleased? Who knows, that person might never come. Even if he came, it wasn't as if he didn't have a way to deal with him. Little Hatchie saw that his expression was firm, as if he was really going to do this. She immediately felt unwell. What was this called? After waiting for Little Hatchie's reply for a long time, Liang He was also a bit nervous. "Lady Little Hatchie, what do you think?" Little Hatchie." Suddenly, a calm and cold voice came from behind him. Little Hatchie raised her head and saw that a person had already opened the door to the courtyard. He was holding a sword with both hands and standing upright, looking over with an indifferent expression. It was Yan Qing. Little Hatchie widened her eyes in shock, almost suspecting that she had seen wrongly. Wasn't this person in the Peach Blossom Cove? Why did he suddenly come here? After thinking for a moment, she immediately realized something. "You followed His Highness here?" Yan Qing nodded. His expression was still handsome and cold. His eyes swept across the two, stopping for a moment on Liang He. "Liang He." Liang He's face filled with astonishment. "You know me?" Yan Qing said indifferently, "I've heard of you." Liang He was even more puzzled. This person didn't seem to be from the Illusion God Palace. "You are, from the looks of it." He came from the courtyard and seemed to be very familiar with Little Eight, Yan Qing. Liang He looked. "Yan's His Highness Tian, Ants Hatchie Heeses, of Sav SSS. Was SSS, she, T's, S sheet." She said softly, "Yan Qing, you're finally here. I've been waiting for so long." Yan Qing's body stiffened. He wanted to push her hand away, but when he looked down and saw her beautiful eyes, he suddenly stopped. Liang He was also stunned. "Miss Little Hatchie, you are." During this period of time, he had some understanding of Little Hatchie. Although she was enchanting and beautiful, in reality, she was very distant and polite when interacting with other people. Apart from Chu Luiyue and a few others, she was indifferent to most people. She didn't even bother to talk to them. Not to mention such an intimate attitude. Little Hachi moved forward, intending to hug Yan Qing's arm. However, Yan Qing was holding his sword with both hands, motionless. It was like an iron cylinder defense. She raised her head and glared at him. She reached out and pinched his waist. "Give me your arm. Hurry up." Would it kill him to cooperate with her? However, she didn't manage to twist it. Yan Qing's waist was thin. Under his thin clothes, there were tough muscles. Her pinch was like a toy to him. Yan Qing lowered his eyes to look at her. Little Hachi threw 2 daggers at him. Yan Qing let go of his arm. Little Hachi immediately took advantage of the situation. Her slender white arms held his arm, and she moved closer to him. Her skin was really too white. Under the sunlight, it glowed with a clear and lustrous light. It was as if a slight force would leave a mark on it. Yan Qing calmly looked away. Little Hachi had already turned around to look at Liang He. "Now, is it clear enough?" Liang He's face turned pale. He didn't expect that in the blink of an eye, she would come after he had just gritted his teeth and made such a difficult decision. He paused for a moment before asking, Is this the person you said you liked before?" Yan Qing's eyebrows twitched. Then, he heard the woman beside him laugh softly. "Yes." Yan Qing lowered his eyes slightly. "Look, her appearance, figure, and temperament. Which one of them isn't the best?" Little Hachi said as she tapped the back of Yan Qing's hand. "I remember that you've broken through to God before, right?" Yan Qing paused. "Yes." Little Hachi immediately raised her eyebrows and smiled proudly. Very good. What she wanted was to crush him. "Liang He, now, do you still want to compete? If you were me, who would you choose?" Liang He choked and couldn't say anything. It was one thing to hear about it before, and another to see it with his own eyes. If this person hadn't come, he could still convince himself, but now, she saw such a man standing beside her, and she was intimately leaning against him. The two of them were so close that there was no gap between them, just like a perfect couple. If he continued to pester her, he would really become the joke of the entire illusion god palace. Liang He gritted his teeth, but his face was pale. If he had known earlier, Liang He, right? Before he could continue, Yan Qing's arm dropped and grabbed Little Hachi's hand. His palm was hot, and Little Hachi immediately shivered and looked back at him in surprise. Yan Qing's expression was as cold as before. He looked at Liang He and said lightly, "Since she has already rejected you, please respect yourself. From today onwards, you are not allowed to be within 10 steps of her. Otherwise, you don't want to know how fast my sword is." The last sentence was cold and heavy, and it was a naked threat. Liang He's face turned red, and he was extremely embarrassed. But he was a celestial doctor. Unless he couldn't take it anymore, he wouldn't fight with a venerable god expert. Yan Qing was too lazy to care about his reply. He pulled Little Hachi and turned around. "Little Hachi, let's go." Little Eight blinked. Seeing Liang He's defeated expression, and knowing that he wasn't going to chase after them, Little Eight happily followed him. The courtyard's door was quickly closed. Liang He stood there for a while. Feeling extremely embarrassed, he finally left in a hurry. Little Eight turned his head to take a look and saw that he had already fled. Instantly, he narrowed his eyes in satisfaction and smiled. To deal with this kind of person, she had to use ruthless moves. Although she was shocked when he agreed to her suggestion, after thinking about it carefully, she felt that something was wrong. Liang He was the youngest supreme doctor in the illusion god palace. How could he really do this? As soon as Yan Qing appeared, he was forced to retreat. She turned around. Lord Yan Qing, many thanks. I couldn't tell that you were quite sensible. Yan Qing let go of her hand. His fingertips seemed to still have that delicate and smooth touch, as well as a faint wisp of her fragrance. He said softly, "It's nothing. Don't mention it." Chapter 2270. Little Hachi pursed her red lips. There was nothing wrong with Yan Qing. He was just as cold as an iceberg all day long. He was so serious that he was almost stubborn. She thanked him sincerely, but he was still so polite. She yawned. Then I won't disturb you, Mr. Yan Qing. I'll go back first. She had just taken a step when Yan Qing called her again. Miss Little Hachi. Little Hachi paused and looked back at him. Her beautiful eyes narrowed slightly. What did you call me just now? Yan Qing was stunned. Miss Little Hachi. That's not right. You just called me Little 8. Little Hachi walked forward and came to Yan Qing. She tilted her head and looked at him. Why did you call me Little Hachi now? You sound so unfamiliar. She thought they were already familiar with each other. Yan Qing paused for a moment. There was a reason just now. Little Hachi stared at him for a while and snorted. Forget it. Call me whatever you want. She couldn't teach this person in a short time. After solving a small problem, Little 8's mood was still very good. Moreover, it could be said that he owed Yan Qing a favor. Please take care of me in the future, Mr. Yan Qing. If something like this happens again, please remember to help me, Mr. Yan Qing. Yan Qing's expression changed slightly. In the future. This is not appropriate, is it? How could Little 8 not know what he was thinking? His lips curled up. Mr. Yan Qing, you're not married, and I'm not married. What's wrong with this? She didn't care about those people, but as time passed and there were more and more people, she would be annoyed occasionally. Now that Yan Qing was here, wouldn't it save her a lot of trouble? Yan Qing looked at her and asked. If one day Little Hachi girl meets someone she likes, then I'll explain to him when the time comes. Little Hachi patted him on the shoulder. Don't worry, I won't implicate others because of this. Suddenly, she seemed to have thought of something, and her eyes widened slightly. Could it be that Lord Yan Qing already has someone he likes? If that was the case, then it was indeed inappropriate for her to do so. Yan Qing looked at her and his Adam's apple bobbed. No. Little Hachi was relieved and smiled again. That's good, that's good. I'll take my leave first. I won't disturb Lord Yan Qing. As he spoke, he walked towards his room. After a long time, Yan Qing withdrew her gaze and rubbed her fingertips gently. A few days passed in the blink of an eye. Chu Luiyue was still moving forward on the star path. She had already deciphered almost all of the Grand Xian King Division's profound formations. The one in front of her was the last one. As long as she successfully executed this, it would mean that she had completed 4/5 of the entire star path and officially stepped into the path of a Grand Master's profound formation. The surrounding people were also waiting with bated breath. At this point, Chu Liuyue's talent and strength were already beyond doubt. Even if she didn't have a bloodline totem, everything she had displayed so far was enough to make people exclaim in admiration. Previously, when she broke Mu Yafeng's record, everyone thought that she was at most a little stronger than Mu Yafeng. But looking at it now, how was it just a little? Chu Luiyue had clearly left Mu Yafeng far behind. Bang! A silver stream of light flew up. A profound formation instantly condensed above Chu Liuyue's head. She raised her head slightly and took a look. Then, she let out a long breath. Actually, Her mental energy and strength were also greatly exhausted at this time. Her lips were somewhat pale. She closed her eyes and adjusted the aura in her body. Seeing this, everyone couldn't help but look at each other. Is she going to stop? She can't not stop. Isn't she a Grand Xian King teacher? The profound formations in front are all at the Grand Master level. That's true. But even so, she's still really powerful. This speed, if it were me, I really wouldn't dare to think about it. If she also had a bloodline totem, what would Mu Yafeng do? I reckon that the seventh divine emissary would also treat her differently. What a pity. All kinds of discussions came one after another. There were also some people who quietly looked at Mu Yafeng and observed her expression. It was just that Mu Yafeng was expressionless at this time, so they couldn't see anything. Of course, she was definitely unhappy. If it were anyone else, they probably wouldn't be happy at this time. How could Mu Yafeng not know that these people were looking at her? All these years, because she was highly regarded by the seventh divine emissary, she was pursued by many people and also secretly envied by many people. There were definitely many people who were waiting to see her make a fool of herself. So no matter what, she definitely couldn't show anything at this time. Seeing that the last profound formation of a Grand Xian King teacher was also displayed, Mu Yafeng's hands in her sleeves clenched into a ball. It didn't matter. She was only a Grand Xian King teacher. Even if she had already seen the mythical flame diagram, it was impossible for her to comprehend those profound formations in such a short time. How could that threshold be crossed so easily? Thinking of this, Mu Yafeng's mood finally improved a little. She turned around and planned to leave. However, at this time, the surrounding crowd suddenly became restless. Many people sucked in cold air and let out waves of exclamations. Mu Yafeng immediately felt uneasy and turned around to look. This look finally caused the calm expression on her face to crack. A trace of shock and disbelief flowed out from between her brows. The woman standing on the star path didn't leave as everyone expected. Instead, after a short rest, she continued forward. Without the slightest hesitation, she stepped in. At the same time, a spot of light suddenly lit up. A Grand Master profound formation. Chapter 2271. Without any hesitation, she stepped into the path of the great Grand Master Xian formation. Countless streams of light flew out from her hands and quickly intertwined with each other to draw an extremely complicated Xian formation. Many people were dazzled just by looking at it. However, from the beginning to the end, Chu Liuyue's movements did not have the slightest hesitation or pause. Every ray of light seemed to have its own consciousness as they landed where they were supposed to be. After a while, the outline of a Xian formation appeared in front of her. The lines on it were also quickly filling in and outlining. She's actually trying to use a great Grandmaster Xian formation. After the initial commotion, the surrounding crowd quieted down. Countless pairs of eyes stared at this scene without blinking, afraid that they would miss something. Mu Yafeng was also watching. However, the more she watched, the more panicked she felt. From the looks of it, Chu Liyue did not seem to be using a great Grandmaster Xian formation for the first time. Could it be that she's hiding her strength? Mu Yafeng could not help but murmur softly. Other than this answer, she could not think of any other reasonable explanation. However, Chu Liyue was a god and had just broken through to Supreme Doctor. How could she still be a great Grandmaster? Even if the illusory god palace gathered all the top geniuses in the world, there had never been such a heaven-defying person. Illusory god palace. When Chu Liyue stepped forward and began to try to use a great Grandmaster Xian formation, Jin Yunlai knew about it. He stood with his hands behind his back and stared in the direction of the star path. After a moment, he no longer hesitated and walked outside. Even if she did not have a bloodline totem, such talent was extremely rare. He had to make a trip there personally. When he passed by the black jade square, he glanced out of the corner of his eye and saw Yu Qian standing there. Jin Yunlai stopped in his tracks, half-turned, and bowed in Yu Qian's direction. Second Divine Envoy. Yu Qian asked, "Are you planning to meet Shengwan Yu?" Jin Yunlai was not surprised that he guessed it and nodded. "Yes." Yu Qian smiled. "I heard that he's not even 20 years old yet. To be able to perform so well, it's indeed rare." Jin Yunlai looked at him strangely. Yu Qian's standards were actually very high. There weren't many people in the entire illusory god palace that could receive such praise from him. "Just go ahead. After she finishes walking the Star Road, bring her to Fengming Mountain and say that I want to see her." Jin Yunlai was shocked. Fengming Mountain. Yu Qian nodded and laughed. "You probably don't know, but the current young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan is her contracted magical beast." Jin Yunlai walked out of the illusory shrine with mixed feelings and followed the star path. The moment he appeared on the star passage, he immediately attracted the attention of many people. "The seventh divine emissary is here. Are you here for Shengwan Yu? That must be it, right? After all, Shengwan Yu is the only one on the star passage. With such talent and performance, the seventh divine emissary would have already arrived if it were someone else. It's just that Shengwan Yu doesn't have a bloodline totem, so it's been delayed until now." Mu Yafing heard the commotion and immediately looked up. When she saw that it was really Jin Yunlai, she pursed her lips and dug her nails into her palms. Even this person is here. Is Chu Luiyue really going to make a comeback? Bang! A loud explosion sounded. Mu Yafing turned around in realization and saw a silver profound formation that was much bigger than the one before. It was also much brighter and more dazzling than before. It was like a flower blooming in midair. The bright light illuminated the surroundings, and it also added a layer of faint light to Chu Luiyue, who was standing below. Everyone was silent. The Grand Master Xian formation was completed. This also meant that Chu Luiyue had officially broken through to the Grand Master Xian formation. Mu Yafing's face turned pale and she almost couldn't stand straight. She had suffered too many blows during this period of time. Moreover, they all came from the same person. Every time she thought that she had guessed Chu Luiyue's true cultivation level, the other party would display even more shocking abilities. Looking at the great Grand Master's Xian formation that had been successfully unleashed, there was a moment where she was completely stunned. She wasn't the only one. Most of the onlookers felt the same way, including Jin Yunlai. He couldn't help but frown as he looked at the woman in a red dress with her hair flying in the wind. "You deliberately concealed your strength before this." Chu Luiyue looked up. The Xian formation was displayed perfectly and it was a good start. Only when she heard Jin Yunlai's voice did she retract her gaze, and the corners of her lips raised into a brilliant arc. "No, why would the seventh divine emissary say that?" Jin Yunlai didn't believe her. "If you weren't a grandmaster, how could you have comprehended this Xian formation in such a short time? Even a grandmaster would need at least a month to do so." She hadn't even been in the illusory god palace for that long. Chu Luiyue smiled lightly. "Seventh divine emissary, I believe you can tell if I'm hiding my strength or not. As for how I did it in such a short time, the reason is simple: I'm very talented." Jin Yunlai, everyone, no one could refute this answer. Looking at Chu Luiyue's magnanimous and relaxed appearance, Jin Yunlai's heart wavered. Could it be that I really underestimated her before? When she walked the star path last time, I did pay attention. She was indeed a Grandmaster Xian. Did she really break through recently? But this was too. Jin Yunlai frowned. He suddenly understood why the Precious Treasures Pavilion had chosen her. If what she said was true, then the aptitude she possessed was extremely terrifying. Jin Yunlai stared at her for a while and asked again. Do you still want to continue? Chu Luiyue glanced ahead. The Xian formations in this area were relatively simple and wouldn't take too much effort. But Jin Yunlai's arrival at this time seemed a little unusual. No. She shook her head and looked at Jin Yunlai. Seventh Divine Emissary, are you looking for me for something? Jin Yunlai knew that she was very smart, so she didn't hide it and simply nodded. Come with me. After saying that, she turned and walked towards the illusory god palace. Chu Luiyue was stunned. Jin Yunlai had always looked down on her. It was the first time that he took the initiative to look for her like today. Moreover, why was he still walking towards the illusory god palace? Was there anything that he couldn't say here? Chu Luiyue's mind raced. Without any hesitation, she followed him. After the two left, the originally silent crowd suddenly became restless and all kinds of guesses were made. Mu Yafeng was annoyed and turned to leave. On the other side, Chu Luiyue followed Jin Yunlai all the way. Jin Yunlai didn't say anything along the way, so Chu Luiyue tactfully kept quiet. The two, one in front and one behind, arrived at the gate of the illusory god palace again. Then, Jin Yunlai turned and walked to the right. Chapter 2272. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. This was the end of the star path, and further ahead was the magnificent and sacred palace of the illusory god. Other than that, there was only the rolling mountain range behind them. They were obviously not going to the palace of the illusory god. Chu Luiyue hesitated for a moment, and finally asked, Seventh Oracle, where are we going now? Jin Yunlai didn't even turn his head. Fengming Mountain. Chu Luiyue was stunned. Fengming Mountain. What's that place? Jin Yunlai didn't stop walking. You'll know when we get there. His voice was as cold as ever, as if he didn't want to say more. Chu Luiyue's lips moved, and she swallowed the rest of her words. Yes. Chu Luiyue continued to follow Jin Yunlai. They were walking along the outer wall of the palace of the illusory god. Because it was still cold and cheerless, there was no one else on the wide road except for the two of them. After all, this was still the territory of the palace of the illusory god. After walking for a while, Jin Yunlai finally stopped. In front of the two of them, there was a translucent barrier that blocked the road. A faint pressure was emitted from it. Even though Chu Luiyue was already a venerable god expert, she still felt a sense of suffocation in her chest. She frowned slightly, and quietly became alert. This time, the second oracle wants to see you. You should think about what to say later. Jin Yunlai finally turned around to look at her and said indifferently. Chu Luiyue was stunned. The second oracle. This identity was already the second in command of the oracles, and even Jin Yunlai and Xu Jing had to treat him with respect. But such a person actually wanted to see her at this time. In an instant, countless guesses flashed through Chu Luiyue's mind, but her face was as calm as ever. Thank you for your guidance, seventh oracle. Jin Yunlai nodded when she saw that she was neither servile nor overbearing. Other than his bloodline totem, Chu Luiyue's performance in other aspects was flawless. He raised his chin. Go in. Chu Luiyue felt a little strange. The seventh oracle is not coming with us. Jin Yunlai narrowed her eyes. This is Phoenix Cry Mountain, adjacent to the illusory god palace, and also one of the forbidden areas of the entire illusory god palace. Ordinary people were not allowed to enter. He couldn't do it either. Chu Luiyue revealed a look of understanding, but secretly snorted in his heart. It turned out that this was the forbidden area that Jin Yunlai had mentioned before. However, he said that it was one of the forbidden areas. The illusory god palace had quite a few forbidden areas. She collected her thoughts and walked forward. She took a step forward, and her figure disappeared behind the barrier. Seeing that she had entered, Jin Yunlai frowned and remained silent for a while. He had always felt that it was inappropriate for the Yu Qian to meet Chu Luiyue here. However, the Yu Qian was the second oracle after all. In the current illusory god palace, he had a lot of authority. Especially now that the first oracle had been in seclusion, many things had fallen into the hands of the second oracle. Jin Yunlai suddenly remembered what Xu Jing had said before. The gate of heaven had already opened. Logically speaking, the first oracle should have come out. He pondered for a long time before turning around and leaving. At this moment, Chu Luiyue passed through the barrier and came inside. She stood still and looked forward. She was stunned. In front of her was a steep and tall mountain. However, there was not a single blade of grass on this mountain. It was just a charred and bare area. It looked as if it had just experienced a big fire. Even the area at the foot of the mountain was barren. There was no sign of life. Standing here and looking at this scene, she seemed to be able to smell the faint burning smell in the air. However, when she looked carefully, she found that many of the stones on the mountain had been polished with traces of vicissitudes. Even if something had really happened here, it did not seem to have happened recently. She suddenly thought of something and looked back. The magnificent illusory god palace was right behind her. However, there was a translucent barrier falling from the sky, separating the illusory god palace and this place. It was as if they were two different worlds. In an instant, she understood something. This so-called Fengming Mountain was actually the back mountain of the illusory god palace. The rumors that she had heard before suddenly appeared in her mind. That's right. Xiao Ran once said that tens of thousands of years ago, the illusory god palace had experienced a big fire that almost burned half of the palace. The current illusory god palace took 1,000 years to repair with great difficulty. It was also at that time that the crimson gold celestial phoenix, the guardian beast of the palace, defected from the illusory god palace. Since then, it implicated the entire clan and became sinners. Could it be that this Fengming Mountain was also? It seems that you are quite interested in the illusory god palace. A gentle and young voice suddenly came. Chu Luiyue looked back vigilantly and saw a person coming from the scorched Fengming Mountain. His speed was very fast. In a few breaths, he arrived in front of Chu Luiyue. When he arrived, there was not even the slightest fluctuation of energy around him. Chu Luiyue's heart trembled. This person's strength was definitely above the god realm. She quickly sized up the man in front of her. He looked to be in his 20s, handsome and gentle. It was really hard to imagine that he was the second divine envoy who controlled the life and death of countless people. At this time, Yu Qian was also looking at her. A faint wave of emotion flashed through his eyes. Greetings, second divine envoy. Chu Luiyue bowed her head respectfully and politely. Yu Qian came back to his senses and slowly smiled. I asked you to come here today because I have something to tell you. He raised his finger and pointed at the Fengming Mountain behind him. Do you know where this place is? Chu Luiyue was startled. Wasn't this the Fengming Mountain? Where else could it be? As if seeing through her thoughts, Yu Qian smiled and said, That's right. In the past, the guardian beast of the Divine Master, the crimson gold celestial phoenix, was raised here. Chapter 2273. Divine Master. Chu Luiyue's pupils suddenly shrank. Almost instantly, she understood that the Divine Master, that Yu Qian mentioned, must be the true master of the palace of the illusory god. So, the crimson gold heavenly phoenix ancestor was not only the guardian beast of the palace, but also the Divine Master personally took care of it. To be able to leave the back mountain of the palace of the illusory god to it, it was enough to show the trust and love that the Divine Master had for it. But she didn't know what happened later that caused the Divine Master to betray and even directly burn down the palace of the illusory god. As it was related to the heavy secrets of the past, Chu Luiyue tactfully didn't answer. Yu Qian put one hand behind his back, slightly raised his head, looked at Feng Mingshan, and sighed softly. The Divine Master treated Yi Ling very well, but unfortunately, it let the Divine Master down. Chu Luiyue slightly pursed her lips. Yi Ling. This should be the name of the crimson gold heavenly phoenix ancestor. Hearing Yu Qian's words, it seemed that everything was as the rumors said back then. But who knew what the truth was? Yu Qian chuckled when he saw that she had remained silent. You don't have to be nervous. I didn't mean anything by saying this. I just felt emotional when I saw you. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. Me? What was so good about her that made him feel emotional? She wasn't naive enough to think that Yu Qian, the second divine envoy of the palace of the illusory god, was really just emotional when he mentioned the past in front of her. Such a person's scheming methods were top-notch. Even if it was a sigh, a look, it was usually full of deep meaning. If it wasn't for another purpose, he wouldn't have let her come, let alone mention these things to someone like her who didn't even have a bloodline totem. Yu Qian nodded and said, yes. Didn't you contract with the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan? His expression and eyes were clearly very gentle, as if he was chatting casually with a close friend. However, Chu Luiyue clearly sensed an extremely dangerous icy aura, which instantly enveloped her. Her entire body tensed up. She looked up and fixed her gaze on Yu Qian. She felt a chill run down her spine. At this moment, even the air seemed to freeze. After a while, Chu Luiyue gently nodded. Yes. I contracted a crimson gold heavenly phoenix and it has been with me for many years. Why did the second messenger suddenly ask about this? Yu Qian revealed a satisfied expression. He always liked to deal with honest people. He laughed. That's no ordinary crimson gold heavenly phoenix. You have to know that in the past 10,000 years, the entire Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan has only produced two people with the purest bloodline. One is Yi Ling, and the other is the one you contracted. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. Actually, I invited you here today to tell you something. I hope you can break the contract with that Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix. Yu Qian's tone was very calm, as if he was talking about a trivial matter. Chu Luiyue noticed that he didn't have any intention of compromising in his words. The corners of her lips curled up slightly as she asked with a faint smile. Second messenger, can I say no? Yu Qian's expression was gentle. I'm afraid not. Chu Luiyue shut her mouth. She knew that the other party's attitude was firm. It was useless to continue talking. The other party was the second messenger. His status and strength were much higher than hers. She didn't seem to have any conditions to negotiate with the other party. After a long while, Chu Luiyue asked. Second messenger, what if I don't agree? Yu Qian said. That's a pity. I heard that Taizu of yours has a chance of breaking through to become a refining saint. And those subordinates are also quite talented. By the way, it seems that you brought your husband with you this time. Chu Luiyue's eyes turned completely cold. Master, the seventh messenger has asked the princess to leave. Yan Qing walked into the room and saw Rong Xiu sitting by the window. There was a chess set in front of him. He was holding a black chess piece between his slender fingers. He seemed to be hesitating where to put it. When he heard Yan Qing's words, he didn't even raise his head. He only said, yes. Yan Qing frowned slightly. After a moment of hesitation, she said. I'm afraid that the second messenger is the one who wants to see the princess. I know. Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows as he spoke. Then he raised his head and looked out of the window. He has always been calm. It's rare for him to lose his composure. It seems that the situation is not good. Yan Qing was even more worried. Master, with his character, once he is forced into a corner, I'm afraid that he will do anything. When that time comes, the princess will be in even more danger. Of course he will be anxious. The gate of heaven has been open for nearly 2 months. There is not much time left for him. Rong Xiao said lightly. Pa, the black chess piece was placed, instantly killing the white chess piece's last chance of survival. If he wants to hit the wall, let him go. There is no need to stop him. Yan Qing was shocked. Then she suddenly realized something and nodded slightly. Yes. Fengming Mountain. Hearing Chu Liuyue's answer, Yu Qian was not angry. Instead, he smiled slightly. After all, it is an ancient divine beast with a pure bloodline. It is normal that you are not willing to part with it. If it were me, I would not make this decision easily. How about this? I will use a condition to make an exchange with you. What do you want? Just say it. If it were others, they would probably think that Yu Qian was easy to talk to. But Chu Luyue did not think so. This made her even more vigilant. In comparison, Yu Qian had the absolute right to speak in front of her. Even if she did not agree, could Yu Qian not do anything to her? But when he heard her refusal, not only did he not force her, he even took a step back. This matter itself was full of strangeness. Seeing that Chu Luyue did not speak for a long time, Yu Qian said again, I see that you seem to be very interested in the palace of the illusory god. If you want to come in, just nod your head. And I can guarantee that you will be treated well in the palace of the illusory god in the future. Chu Luyue smiled. The second divine envoy is right. I do want to enter the palace of the illusory god. However, as long as I finish the star path, I can achieve this goal. Why should I use dumpling to exchange? Yu Qian suddenly laughed, as if he had heard a joke. Sheng Guanyu, even if you break all the Xian formations on the star path, it is useless. Because you don't have a bloodline totem, the door of the palace of the illusory god will never open for you. Chu Luyue did not say anything. However, if you are willing to break the contract with that crimson gold sky phoenix, I can let you have a bloodline totem. In this way, you can enter the palace of the illusory god and even become a god in the future. Why not? Chu Luyue was shocked. Yu Qian's words meant, I heard that Mu Yafeng offended you before. Her bloodline power is not bad. If you don't mind, you can choose her. Of course, if you don't like her, there are many other choices in the palace of the illusory god. Yu Qian took a step forward and looked down at her with a smile on his lips. As long as you agree to my conditions, all of this will be within your reach. Chapter 2275. If it was anyone else who spoke to Yu Qian like this, they might have already been beheaded. But Dumpling was different. Yu Qian wasn't angry when he heard this. Instead, he was curious. He sized up Dumpling for a while, and his eyes were filled with unconcealable admiration. She's not even an adult yet, but she can already take human form. She really has a pure bloodline. Previously, he had only heard about it, but now that he saw it with his own eyes, he knew how heaven-defying this crimson gold heavenly phoenix was. No wonder Yi Zhao didn't hesitate to freeze and seal the divine phoenix mountain, causing all the clansmen to fall into a deep sleep and refuse to hand her over. Your Dumpling. The impatience and frustration in Yu Qian's heart dissipated. His voice was even gentler and more polite than when he was talking to Chu Luyue. Dumpling hugged Chu Liyue's neck tightly and was extremely vigilant. You're not allowed to call my name. Chu Luyue patted her back lightly and wiped away the tears hanging at the corner of her eyes as she coaxed her. Dumpling, don't cry. You won't abandon you. Dumpling pursed her lips as if she was about to cry again, but she held it in and nodded vigorously. Yes. I want to be with you. Looking at the scene in front of him, Yu Qian frowned slightly. According to his previous plan, after letting Chu Luiyue and Dumpling break the contract, he would completely cut off all contact between the two. But now, it seemed that he was facing a lot of pressure. Chu Luiyue was fine, but the key was Dumpling. She was still young and only had Chu Luiyue in her eyes. If he forcefully snatched her away, he was afraid that she would really do something ruthless. Absolutely not. A crimson gold heavenly phoenix with a pure bloodline was extremely rare. He had waited for so many years for this one. No matter what, there couldn't be any problems. After hesitating for a long time, he finally said, "Since you guys are so insistent, then, we'll each take a step back. From now on, you can come here once a month." "Second messenger," I said at any time. Chu Luiyue emphasized. Yu Qian paused. "Half a month." Chu Luiyue smiled. "Second divine envoy, you are so insincere. It is very difficult for me to agree to your request." Yu Qian gritted his teeth. It was rare for him to lose control like this, but the woman in front of him was really, the two sides were in a deadlock for a long time. Finally, Yu Qian said, "Good. I promise you." In any case, Fengming Mountain was surrounded by a barrier, and there weren't many people here. If she wanted to come, she could just come. What could she possibly do? However, I have to warn you in advance. Phoenix Cry Mountain was a holy land for cultivation for crimson gold heavenly phoenixes. However, this was not the case for the human race. If you insist on coming, I won't stop you as long as you can handle it. Yu Qian said in a deep voice. The corner of Chu Luiyue's lips curled up. "You don't have to worry about that." Yu Qian looked at her deeply. However, she had already looked at Dumpling in her arms and comforted her softly. "Dumpling, don't be afraid. Just treat it as a change of place to cultivate. In any case, I will often come over to accompany you." Bean-sized crystal tears rolled down from Dumpling's eyes again. Her small body was sobbing, but she didn't say anything else. She only nodded her head while choking with sobs. All right. She knew that this was the best choice for the current situation. Chu Luiyue kissed the space between her eyebrows with heartache. "Dumpling, be good." Seeing this, the Yu Qian didn't say anything else. With a wave of his sleeve, a palm-sized white jade token flew out. "This is my token. If you want to come to Fengming Mountain in the future, you can use this." Chu Luiyue caught the white jade token. "Thank you, second messenger." "No need." Yu Qian raised his chin. "Now, you can cancel the contract." Hearing this, Dumpling instantly hugged Chu Luiyue even tighter. Chu Luiyue coaxed her for a while more before Dumpling reluctantly let go and stood in front of her. The two of them faced each other. Chu Luiyue looked deeply at Dumpling, then closed his eyes. She gently raised her hand, and a scarlet gold light suddenly flew out from her palm, heading straight for Dumpling. Dumpling's small shoulders trembled, and she also stretched out her hand with red eyes. The same ray of light flew out from her hand. The two rays of light converged and connected in midair, and the pressure was faintly discernible. Yu Qian watched from the side, his eyes moving slightly. The aura of the purest bloodline was indeed different. Even Yi Zhao, who had opened his seventh meridian, could not be compared to it. Although he had been checkmated by Chu Luiyue, it was all worth it. Bang! A faint shattering sound was heard. The two rays of light that were connected to each other were also annihilated. Yu Qian's heart settled. In this way, the contract between Chu Luiyue and Dumpling was completely cancelled. He lifted his leg and walked forward. "Dumpling, follow me." As he spoke, he had already reached out his hand. However, at this moment, his expression suddenly froze. A rune gradually flashed between Dumpling's brows. Immediately after, a familiar aura came from her body. When he saw this, Yu Qian's brows furrowed tightly. He quickly turned around and looked at Chu Luiyue. His gaze was cold and sharp like a knife. When it landed on a person's body, it was almost bone-piercing. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat, and he immediately looked up. Their gazes met, and in an instant, sparks seemed to fly in all directions. Yu Qian's gaze was solid, and it carried a powerful pressure that crushed over. He asked word by word, "Shangguanyu, is your contract really cancelled?" Chu Luiyue's heart instantly tightened. Digression, 6 p.m. Chapter 2276. After a short moment of silence, she said, "Of course." She and Dumpling didn't have an ordinary contract to begin with. Now that she said it was cancelled, it was just to save some face. Could the Yu Qian really see something? Then what's with the aura in her body? The Yu Qian's eyes were full of scrutinizing pressure as he stared at Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue's eyebrows twitched slightly. Just as he was about to ask, Dumpling asked crisply, "Hey, are you talking about this?" The Yu Qian turned around and saw Dumpling pointing at the gradually fading totem between her eyebrows and asked. "That's right." The Yu Qian replied affirmatively, but his eyes were still full of suspicion. "If the contract between the two of you has really been cancelled, why is there still this aura left? This is clearly a special power that the Crimson Gold Celestial Phoenix has after contracting with a human. Although ordinary Crimson Gold Celestial Phoenixes inherited a certain amount of bloodline power, they wouldn't have such an aura. But Dumpling had it at this moment." Hearing this answer, Chu Luiyue and Dumpling quickly looked at each other and exchanged glances. His explanation was very interesting. Since this aura was only produced when the Crimson Gold Celestial Phoenix contracted with a human, how did he know? Seeing how confident he was, he must have seen it before. Then, there was only one explanation: the ancestor of the Crimson Gold Celestial Phoenix, Yi Ling, had a contract with the God Master of the Palace of the Illusory God. So now, he began to suspect Dumpling. Understanding this point, Chu Luiyue looked at Dumpling and blinked gently. Dumpling's heart lit up, and she immediately took out a crimson gold feather. "I think it should be because of the ancestor's golden feather, right?" Seeing Dumpling take out the ancestor's golden feather, a trace of shock flashed across the Yu Qian's face. "Why do you have this?" "Of course it's because I'm the young master." Dumpling rolled her eyes and carefully put away the ancestor's golden feather. "If it's not with me, do you think it's with you?" She hated Yu Qian to the core, so she didn't hold back when she spoke. However, Yu Qian didn't have the time to care about this. He frowned doubtfully and looked at Dumpling. The aura he had sensed earlier was indeed the same as the aura on the ancestor's golden feather. Could it be that I was wrong? After all, Dumpling had the purest bloodline, so it was reasonable for her to obtain the ancestor's golden feather. Back then, he had asked Yi Zhao for it, but he didn't manage to get it. It turned out that she was with Dumpling. Tuanzi's big eyes and the tip of her nose were still red. She sniffled and continued to complain. "You've already separated me from Yu. What other contract can I have?" His words were still filled with anger and dissatisfaction. Yu Qian gradually dispelled the doubts in his heart, and his expression eased. "That's for the best. You have the purest bloodline. That kind of contract will only hinder your breakthrough." As he said that, he raised his chin. "Let's go back to Fengming Mountain. After that, you'll be staying here most of the time." Dumpling looked at Chu Luiyue eagerly. "I want Yu to go with me." Yu Qian paused. He wanted to directly refuse, but seeing that Dumpling was still agitated, he finally nodded and snorted. "All right. As long as she can go up, I won't stop her." With that, he tapped the tip of his foot and took the lead to rush towards Fengming Mountain. On the other hand, Tuanzi turned around, ran over, and hugged Chu Liuyue's leg with its shiny little feet. "Ah, you, come with me." Chu Liyue bent down and picked her up. "All right." In any case, she would come here many times in the future. She would first go and take a look at the situation on Fengming Mountain. Dumpling hugged her and snuggled into her embrace, her face full of reluctance. Chu Liyue patted her back and rushed towards Yu Qian. Very quickly, Chu Liyue understood why Yu Qian said those words. On Fengming Mountain, there was an extremely powerful pressure. She had only gotten a little closer when she felt as if her chest was being pressed down by something. She felt stuffy and her speed also decreased. A transparent heat wave swept over from the mountain. It was scorching hot. Chu Liuyue's forehead was quickly covered in sweat. His back was also quickly drenched in sweat, and then quickly evaporated. Yu Qian turned around to look. Seeing her reaction, he sneered in his heart. The fire that year on Fengming Mountain had directly burned down the entire back mountain. Even though so many years had passed, every inch of land and every piece of rock still retained traces of what had happened back then. Back then, Yi Ling's 9 meridians had all been opened, and his strength was unparalleled. Even though he had been dead for many years, his power was still there. Even he didn't come here often. Not to mention a god like Chu Liyue. About 15 minutes later, Yu Qian arrived at the peak of Fengming Mountain. He stood with his hands behind his back and waited for another 15 minutes before Chu Liyue and Dumpling finally arrived. The moment her feet landed on the mountain, Chu Liyue's eyebrows twitched, and she summoned her divine body almost immediately. A layer of beautiful soft armor quickly covered her body. With the divine body as a barrier, the burning sensation was finally reduced by a lot. "Ah, are you all right?" Dumpling asked worriedly. Chu Liyue shook her head. "I'm fine." Because she was worried that she would reveal something in front of Yu Qian, she had stopped borrowing Dumpling's power from just now. That was why it took her a lot of effort to come here. However, as long as she could hide it from Yu Qian, it was all worth it. Dumpling jumped down from her arms. She was barefooted, and her small, white feet stepped on the scorched mountain rocks. Not only did she not look like she was in pain, but she even widened her eyes slightly as she tugged at the corner of Chu Liyue's shirt and muttered, "I'm sorry." "Ah, it's so comfortable here." Chu Liyue felt relieved. It was fine as long as Dumpling was fine. Yu Qian chuckled at the side. The rocks on the back mountain were specially gathered by the divine master for Yi Ling back then. Not only can they nourish his body, but they can also increase his cultivation speed. Naturally, other places can't compare to them. If it were an ordinary crimson gold heavenly phoenix, they wouldn't be able to withstand it here. However, Dumpling has the purest bloodline, so she won't have this problem. This was why he had to choose this place to meet Chu Liyue. Fengming Mountain was originally prepared for Dumpling. Hearing his words, Dumpling curled her lips. No matter how good the place is, it has already been burned down. What's there to cherish? She still liked to be with Yu. Yi Zhao knew that she was extremely dependent on Chu Liyue and couldn't change it in a short time, so he didn't pay much attention to it. In any case, Chu Liyue wouldn't come often in the future. As time passed, the relationship between Dumpling and her would naturally fade. "Dumpling, you can cultivate here in the future." Yu Qian's lips curled up. "With your talent, it won't be long before you open your 7th meridian. In the future, it won't even be a problem for you to open your 9th meridian." Chapter 2277. Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat. The Yu Qian's words, it was as if he really hoped that Dumpling could open her meridians as soon as possible. This was the same as the owner of the eye from before, That person was obviously not the Yu Qian, but there must be some unknown relationship between the two. Otherwise, that I wouldn't have been able to summon the illusory god palace back in the Red Moon Desert. Even if it was just an illusion, it was enough to explain the problem. They wanted Dumpling to open her meridians, and even hoped that she would open her 9th meridian. Back then, Yi Ling had opened all 9 meridians, but didn't he betray the illusory god palace? After that, the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan was directly labeled as a sinful clan. Even Yi Zhao was captured and tortured. But Yu Qian's current attitude towards Dumpling was truly suspicious. Dumpling ignored Yu Qian. "Ah, you, can you accompany me to take a look around?" Chu Luiyue rubbed her head. "All right." With that, the two of them walked to the side. Fengming Mountain was steep and towering. Although the top of the mountain was bare, it still contained an extremely shocking amount of power. To Dumpling, it was indeed the best place to cultivate. Walking on the charred mountain rocks, Chu Luiyue's emotions churned as countless thoughts flashed through his mind. All of a sudden, Tuanzi pulled her hand and said, "Ah, you, it's so quiet here. I don't like it." At first, she did feel that this place was very suitable for cultivation, but after staying here for a long time, she felt that this place was too deserted. In the future, when Ayu wasn't around, wouldn't it be boring for her to be alone? Without waiting for Chu Luiyue to speak, Yu Qian took the initiative and said, "If you want to be more lively, the illusory god palace also has a lot of divine beasts. I can get them to accompany you." Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. "Second divine envoy, this Fengming Mountain. I'm afraid ordinary divine beasts won't be able to stay here, right?" Yu Qian said softly, "It doesn't matter, as long as Dumpling likes it." Dumpling glared at him. "I don't like it. Wouldn't it be terrible if those magical beasts all died after coming here?" Chu Luiyue pinched Dumpling's little face. Dumpling is not angry. There is no sign of life here. It is indeed a bit desolate. How about this? I will leave the 2 Tian baby to you. Dumpling was stunned. Really? Chu Luiyue nodded and took out a 2 Tian baby. He bent down and placed it in Dumpling's chubby little hand. The heaven and earth energy here is abundant. It's just right for me to raise it. Dumpling blinked and nodded vigorously. Good. In the future, you should come often too. After getting Chu Luiyue's affirmative answer, Dumpling ran to the side, picked up a stone, and threw it at the ground. Bang! A hole suddenly appeared on the mountain rock. Yu Qian's eyebrows twitched. Fengming Mountain was extremely difficult to shake. Tens of thousands of years of wind and rain had not left many traces on it. Dumpling just casually threw a stone, and Dumpling buried the 2 Tian baby, revealing only the 2 tender leaves at the top, gently swaying in the wind. That's good. Dumpling clapped her hands in satisfaction. She heard that 2 Tian baby could grow up, so it was very suitable to raise it here. Yu Qian glanced at the 2 Tian baby, but didn't care too much about it. It was just a small toy for Dumpling to relieve her boredom. Chu Luiyue wiped the sweat on her forehead that was still dripping down. Dumpling, I will go back first today. I will come to see you tomorrow. Hearing that, Tuanzi ran over and hugged her reluctantly. Then you must come tomorrow. Chu Luiyue smiled lightly. Yes. Then, she took a deep breath and said goodbye to Yu Qian. Yu Qian was naturally happy about her departure. He didn't try to persuade her to stay and directly agreed. However, perhaps it was because Chu Luiyue was still cooperative with Dumpling's matter, or because Dumpling was still here, Yu Qian's attitude was still considered polite. After giving a few more instructions to Dumpling, Chu Luiyue left. After her figure disappeared into the distance, Yu Qian looked at Dumpling. Dumpling turned her back and sat down in front of the 2 Tian baby. Her entire body was filled with disgust for him. Yu Qian didn't mind. As long as she could open her meridians as soon as possible, nothing else mattered. Yu Qian also left quickly. Dumpling was the only one left in the huge Fengming mountain. Her cheeks puffed up in anger as she wiped away the tears hanging from the corner of her eyes and snorted softly. Acting was really not easy. When he got back, he would ask Yu for double the kisses. After Chu Luiyue came out of the barrier, she went straight to her residence. When she returned to the courtyard, it was already very late. Just as she arrived at the door, it opened from the inside. Rong Xiao was standing behind the door. There was a faint smile on his elegant face. "You're back." In an instant, Chu Luiyue's tense mind finally relaxed, and a strong sense of fatigue quickly surged up. During this period of time, she had experienced too many things. Previously, the string in her mind had always been taut, but now that she saw Rong Xiao, she finally let go of her guard. She took a step forward and threw herself into Rong Xiao's arms. Leaning against his firm and warm chest, she could even hear the powerful beating of his heart. A familiar cold fragrance wrapped around her. She took a deep breath and hugged his lean waist tightly with both arms. She leaned her head against his chest and rubbed against it. Rong Xiao's heart instantly softened. He wrapped his arms around her shoulders and pulled her into his embrace. Rong Xiao, she muttered softly. In an instant, a cold light flashed across his eyes as he asked softly, "Who bullied my Yu?" Chapter 2278. Chu Luiyue shook her head. "It's fine, it's just that Dumpling was left at Fengming Mountain." Even though she had used all sorts of methods to deceive Yu Qian, she still worried about Dumpling when she thought about how she would be alone for a long time. Rong Xiao kissed her forehead. "Let's talk inside." On the other side, Jin Yunlai returned to the illusory god palace after sending Chu Luiyue to Fengming Mountain. When he passed by the black jade square, his footsteps paused. Two people were standing not far from the square, whispering something. He knew the man on the left, Kong Qinglin. He was the only refining saint that had appeared in the illusory god palace in recent years. He had just broken through and entered the illusory god palace not long ago. It wasn't strange that he would appear here. But the woman next to him, she was wearing a long dress with an exquisite forehead band. Her black hair fell to her ankles. She had a slender figure and a gentle face. Jin Yunlai didn't have any impression of her. There was no such person in the illusory god palace. "So, if I want to become a refining saint, I have to fight for a ray of holy light from here?" she asked softly. She was gentle, making people feel like they were bathed in a spring breeze. Kong Qinglin nodded. "That's right. This piece of primal chaos holy jade has appeared here tens of thousands of years ago. It can be considered the most precious treasure of the illusory god palace. It contains thousands of holy lights and has boundless power. As long as you can successfully summon a ray of holy light, you can successfully refine a saint artifact." As he spoke, he looked at Suli curiously. "Speaking of which, I haven't asked yet. You said that you just came up from the divine ruins world, but when you came, you were already a refining saint. What's going on? The holy light in it won't leave the illusory god palace." In other words, it was impossible for a refining saint to appear in the divine ruins world below. Hearing Kong Qinglin's words, Jin Yunlai immediately understood. It turned out that this was the refining saint that Chu Luiyue wanted to invite. He leaned to the side and listened attentively. In fact, he also wanted to know what was going on. Suli smiled faintly and explained, "Actually, I didn't break through just now. About 10,000 years ago, I was refining a weapon when a strange phenomenon occurred in the sky. A shield flew down. I don't know how, but I managed to successfully forge a saint artifact." "Shield?" Kong Qinglin was stunned. Yes. It's. Suli raised her hand and pointed forward. Its shape seems to be similar to the missing piece in the middle. Kong Qinglin immediately understood. I see, Suli sighed softly. Unfortunately, the power contained in the shield was too shocking. After I finished refining the saint artifact, I also died, leaving behind only a remnant of my soul. It wasn't easy for me to revive. Only when I came here did I realize that the shield actually flew out from the illusory god palace. The corners of her lips curved slightly as she spoke softly. I don't know how this happened. Kong Qinglin's lips moved as if he wanted to say something. 10,000 years ago, it was probably because of that riot. But this matter was forbidden in the illusory god palace, so he naturally couldn't say it. Suli glanced at him, her eyes flashing slightly as she smiled and said, Right, I heard that there hasn't been a refining saint in the illusory god palace for many years. It's really amazing that you were able to succeed. Hearing this, Kong Qinglin stroked his beard and laughed. Not at all. Compared to you, Suli, I'm still a bit lacking. Although he said that, it was clear that Kong Qinglin acknowledged and was proud of this matter. Of course, he had the qualifications to do so. Suli asked curiously, Actually, I don't understand. Logically speaking, in a place like the illusory god palace where geniuses and experts gather, there should be many who can break through to the refining saint realm. Why is it that you're the only one in all these years? Kong Qinglin subconsciously said, Naturally, it's because of this primal chaos sacred jade. His voice suddenly stopped. Suli had already guessed something. Because of that missing piece. Kong Qinglin looked at Suli with some hesitation, then nodded and said in a low voice, Everyone in the illusory god palace has a tacit understanding of this matter, and very few people have mentioned it in these years. It's only because you're new and have a connection with that piece of chaos black jade that I'm telling you. But it's better not to mention it in the future. Suli was about to ask again when she suddenly heard footsteps behind her. The two turned around at the same time. Seeing who it was, Kong Qinglin was startled and quickly bowed. Greetings, seventh divine emissary. Suli was startled. So the person in front of her was the seventh divine emissary. This name was like a thunderclap reverberating in the ears. She originally thought that she would see him when she came to the heavenly gate, but for some reason, the seventh divine emissary didn't appear that day. Today was the first time she officially met this person. Suli greets the seventh divine emissary. Countless thoughts flashed through her mind, but Suli's face was still calm and gentle as usual. Jin Yunlai looked at her coldly. To be able to become a refining saint in the divine ruins world, you do have some ability. However, this is the illusory god palace. If you want to stay here in the future, you'd better be careful with your words and actions. Don't ask what you shouldn't ask, understand? Was this a warning to her not to continue inquiring about what happened in the past? Suli's mind raced, but her face revealed a bit of nervousness and she slightly lowered her head. Yes. Kong Qinglin's heart also hung in the air. Of course, he knew that those words couldn't be said carelessly, but seeing that Suli was really curious, he couldn't hold back and said it. Who knew that the seventh divine emissary was here? He must have heard everything. However, just as Kong Qinglin was nervous and worried, thinking that he was going to be punished, Jin Yunlai didn't say anything more and turned to leave. Hearing the footsteps gradually fade away, Suli gently sighed and muttered softly. It seems that in this illusory god palace, I really have to be careful everywhere. Kong Qinglin's back was already soaked with sweat. A gentle breeze blew, and a chill went straight to the top of his head. Thank goodness, he wiped the sweat from his forehead with lingering fear. Suli, don't talk about these things in the future. The seventh divine emissary probably saw that it was your first mistake today, so he let you off. If you do it again in the future, it won't be so easy. Suli looked at his reaction thoughtfully. Is the seventh divine emissary very strict? He had only said a few words, but Kong Qinglin was already so nervous. Kong Qinglin smiled bitterly. Not at all the divine emissaries are like this. After all, it's related to the past, forget it. Don't mention it in the future to avoid causing trouble for yourself. Suli blinked her eyes and smiled gently. Okay. On the other side, Jin Yunlai wanted to go back to his residence directly, but halfway there, he suddenly remembered what happened today. He turned around and walked in another direction. Chapter 2279. He walked forward and finally arrived at the door of a courtyard. The courtyard was quiet, and there was no sound at all. Looking in from the outside, one could see a thick pile of fallen leaves in the courtyard. It was as if no one had lived here for many years, and it was lonely and cold. Jin Yunlai raised his hand and knocked on the door. Knock knock. First Oracle, Yunlai requests an audience. He spoke loudly. However, after waiting for a while, there was no response from inside. Jin Yunlai frowned slightly and increased the strength of his hand. Knock knock. First Oracle, I have something important to report to you. Still, there was silence. Jin Yunlai waited for a while, and his eyes flashed with determination. Then, he took a step forward and was about to push the door open and enter. However, at this moment, an extremely powerful aura suddenly came from inside. Jin Yunlai was shocked and immediately retreated without thinking. However, he was fast, but the other party's attack was faster. Bang! He could not dodge in time and was hit in the chest by the force, and he fell heavily to the ground. Pfft! Jin Yunlai's chest shook, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. He clutched his chest and stared at the door in shock. First Oracle, Jin Yunlai, you're too presumptuous. A cold voice came out from inside. It was like a fierce wind and frost that instantly caused Jin Yunlai to freeze on the spot. He forcefully swallowed the strong taste of blood and endured the pain in his body. He quickly got up and bowed respectfully. Yunlai did not mean to offend you. Please forgive me, First Oracle. His heart almost stopped beating at this moment, and the blood in his body instantly froze. The First Oracle's position in the palace of the illusory god was extremely respected. Not to mention the others, even the remaining divine envoys had no choice but to wait obediently. Now, he had tried to barge in, which was a serious crime. After a while, the voice continued to come from inside. Do you know who you are suspecting? Jin Yunlai was shocked and immediately knelt on one knee. Yunlai knows his mistake. Bang! His knee landed heavily on the ground, making people's scalps go numb. This time, it almost made people think that his knees were going to shatter because of this. The courtyard fell into silence once more. Jin Yunlai's heart seemed to be tightly gripped by something, and she didn't dare to breathe. An extreme sense of unease welled up in his heart. He rarely felt this way. But now, he was facing the first divine envoy. The reason why he did what he did just now was because he was suspicious of the First Oracle. For so many years, the first divine emissary had never stepped out of the courtyard. Xu Jing and the others had repeatedly requested to see him, but he had never agreed. Until now, even the authority of Fengming Mountain had been completely handed over to the second divine envoy. Jin Yunlai did not understand. Why did the First Oracle give him all his authority? Why did he stay in this small courtyard and refuse to come out? He could not help doubting it. Therefore, the reason why he took the risk earlier was to test the waters. What was certain was that the first divine envoy was indeed inside. And his strength seemed to have improved compared to before. Just now, if he wanted to, Jin Yunlai's life and death would be in his hands. There won't be a next time. After a long time, the voice finally sounded again. Jin Yunlai let out a long sigh of relief. "Thank you, First Divine Envoy." He bowed respectfully and slowly got up. Yunlai will take his leave. There was no response from inside. Jin Yunlai turned around and left. However, just as he took a step, he suddenly paused. After hesitating for a while, he finally turned around and looked at the tightly shut courtyard door. "First Divine Envoy, are you really at ease to entrust Feng Ming Mountain to the second Divine Envoy? He invited Shengguan Yu over today." After a pause, he said again, "If everything goes smoothly, the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan will stay in Feng Ming Mountain from now on. He has his reasons for doing so." The voice was calm, as if he didn't care too much. Since he's in charge of Feng Ming Mountain now, he can naturally make the decision. If you have any objections, you can directly talk to him. There's no need to come here. But Jin Yunlai wanted to say something but hesitated. But these should be the matters of the First Divine Envoy. He knew what these things meant, but he didn't seem to have any intention of making a move. Could it be that this was his intention all along? Jin Yunlai couldn't figure it out. No matter what, he couldn't go to the second Divine Envoy. After so long, he knew very well what kind of person the Yu Qian was. He usually seemed gentle, but in reality, he was extremely strong. If anyone dared to oppose his decision, he would definitely be dissatisfied. Only the First Divine Envoy could restrain him a little, but now the First Divine Envoy didn't seem to have any intention of interfering. What had the First Divine Envoy been busy with all these years? If it was in the past, he would definitely not let the Yu Qian do as he pleased. But it seemed that the First Divine Envoy wouldn't see him today. Jin Yunlai clenched his fists and stood there for a long time before finally bowing slightly. Yunlai understands. After saying that, he finally left. After he left, the courtyard once again fell into silence. A wind blew, sweeping up the broken leaves in the courtyard, revealing a murderous aura. Suddenly, something seemed to be moving under the pile of leaves. That voice came again. "I know you want to go to Feng Ming Mountain, but now is not the time." The commotion under the pile of leaves finally died down. Jin Yunlai raised his hand and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. His expression had returned to normal. Although what he did just now was dangerous, he didn't regret it. At the very least, it dispelled the doubts in his heart. Although he still didn't know what the First Divine Envoy was planning, he could finally feel at ease. If he didn't want to see him, then so be it. Thinking of this, his hanging heart could be considered to have settled down. Suddenly, a figure hurriedly walked past him. Jin Yunlai was suddenly stunned. Shu Jing. Shouldn't she be at Herb Mountain at this time? What was she doing in such a hurry? Jin Yunlai looked in her direction and frowned slightly. Sixth Divine Envoy. She arrived in front of a courtyard and pushed open the door with ease. Then, she went straight into the room. As soon as she entered, a faint smell of blood assaulted her nose. She frowned slightly and immediately turned around to close the door. The doors and windows of the room were tightly shut, and it was very dark. Coupled with the smell, it was even more uncomfortable. Although she had been here several times, she was still not used to it. Shu Jing calmed herself down and bowed in the direction of the screen. Sixth Divine Envoy, I'm here. A moment later, a hoarse voice sounded. Put everything down. Yes. Shu Jing responded, took out a jade box, and placed it on the table next to her. Chapter 2280. There was a hint of displeasure in that coarse and hoarse voice. Only one. Shu Jing said, after all, this is a medicine at the level of a medical sage. It's extremely difficult to refine. The man chuckled. But it's been many years since you became a medical sage. I can only say that your skills haven't improved much over the years. Xu Jing's expression stiffened for a moment, and a cold look flashed across her eyes. No one liked being said such things, let alone Xu Jing. It's extremely difficult to improve after becoming a medical sage. You can't say that. The person who was in charge of the herb mountain was much more efficient than you after becoming a medical sage. Xu Jing's expression turned completely cold. Sixth divine emissary, if you're not satisfied with me, you can find someone else to help you. She wanted to know who else in the illusory god palace could help her. That voice laughed softly. Why are you in such a hurry? Anyway, the herb mountain is already yours, and no one will fight with you for it. Then, a black rope flew out from behind the screen and took the jade box away. Xu Jing stood with her hands by her side and said coldly, "How do you know? What's more, my authority over the herb mountain has been revoked. How can this herb mountain be considered mine? I heard about this, and it's indeed a bit sudden. But you can't completely blame others for this. Who told you not to restrain yourself before? If you weren't so anxious, you probably wouldn't have fallen to this state." Xu Jing didn't want to talk about this. Her mood was already bad enough, and she couldn't bear to hear other people's criticism. Sixth divine emissary, if you have the time and energy, you should think more about yourself. Xu Jing said coldly. Even with the help of my pill, it's still very difficult for you to reconstruct your divine body. The voice behind the screen was silent for a while. Of course I know that. Xu Jing's eyes flashed slightly, and she asked tentatively, "Actually, I haven't asked you before, but your injuries, what's going on?" To be able to injure the sixth divine emissary to such an extent, it was obvious that the opponent wasn't an ordinary person. However, the sixth divine emissary did not seem to have any intention of telling her this. It's all in the past anyway. There's no point in telling you. Xu Jing was really curious, but she couldn't get anything out of the sixth oracle, so she could only change the topic. By the way, do you know what happened to the first oracle recently? The gate of heaven had been open for 2 months, but he had not stepped out of the gate even once. I went to ask for an audience, but I never received permission. The matters of the first divine envoy are not something you and I can interfere with. If you have the time, you should go back and think about how to improve your strength. Before Xu Jing could finish, the voice inside the room interrupted him in a hurry. He spoke very quickly and his tone was tense. It was very different from usual, as if it was filled with deep fear. Xu Jing frowned. Although the divine envoys were extremely respectful to the first divine envoy, it didn't seem to be to such an extent, right? Why did the sixth divine emissary change so much when he returned this time? She pursed her lips and took a step forward. Mo Shiqian, do you know something? That's how it is. In the room, Chu Luiyue briefly explained the matter to Rongxiu. That second divine envoy is very domineering. If I don't agree, I'm afraid I won't be able to leave Fengming Mountain today. Rongxiu nodded. Chu Luiyue continued, speaking of which, I've never heard of the first divine envoy. This matter involves the divine beast guarding the palace. I thought that the first divine envoy should be in charge. Sun Yi, who was walking to the door, stopped in his tracks. Digression, 6:00. Chapter 2281. However, this pause was only for a moment, and he quickly returned to normal and entered the room. Master, Your Highness. Seeing Sun Yi enter, Chu Luiyue nodded slightly. Perhaps the first divine emissary is busy with other things. Rongxiu said indifferently. The second divine emissary's status is only second to him, so it's not strange for him to be personally in charge of this matter. I'm just curious. Chu Luiyue tapped her fingers on the armrest of the chair. They seemed to want Dumpling to open her meridians as soon as possible. Previously in the Red Moon Desert, the owner of that eye clearly had the same thoughts. He even tried his best to capture Dumpling and forcefully open her meridians. This time, although the second divine emissary, Yu Qian, did not use such cruel methods, from a certain perspective, he still coerced her and Dumpling. Fortunately, the contract between her and Dumpling had already been changed. Otherwise, she really didn't know how to get through this. Chu Luiyue also had her own plans. There was another important reason why she was willing to go with the flow. If Dumpling could open her 7th meridian, there was hope of saving Yi Zhao. Although Fengming Mountain had been burned down, it was still a holy land for cultivation for the crimson gold heavenly phoenix. Especially Dumpling. She had the same pure bloodline as her ancestor and had the ancestor's golden feather in her hands. Obviously, staying at Fengming Mountain would greatly increase her cultivation speed. Lu Yu. At this moment, Mu Hongyu rushed in from outside. Lu Yu, you're back. Chu Luiyue collected her thoughts and looked up. Seeing Mu Hongyu's excited expression, she couldn't help but ask, Hongyu, what's wrong? Mu Hongyu ran over and saw Rongxiao and Xin Yi in the room. She coughed. I have something to tell you. Chu Luiyue nodded. Just say it. Rongxiao and Xin Yi were the people she trusted the most. Mu Hongyu hesitated for a moment, then nodded. She walked closer and said softly, Lu Yu, there seems to be something wrong with the sea outside the illusory god palace. Chu Luiyue's heart stirred as he glanced at Xin Yi. Xin Yi nodded and walked over to close the door. He then raised his hand to set up a barrier, isolating all sounds. Chu Luiyue asked again. What did you find? Mu Hongyu's hands were twisted into a bowl. She was a little conflicted. I think Master might be under that sea. Chu Luiyue's eyes flickered. How can you tell? Did you notice something? Mu Hongyu sighed and explained. Actually, when I came that day, I felt that the sea was a little strange, but I didn't take it to heart at that time. I've been thinking about it for the past few days and finally noticed something strange. Lu Yu, the spatial power under that sea is very complicated. It seems to be Master's work. Chu Luiyue was stunned. The reason why she guessed that Diwu Zhangze was imprisoned under that sea was because she heard a faint painful groan when she left last time. That voice was definitely Diwu Zhangze's. She couldn't have heard wrongly. When Mu Hongyu came to say that there was something wrong with that sea, she thought that she had encountered the same situation as her. She didn't expect, you can sense the changes in the spatial power below. Mu Hongyu nodded and gestured with her hands. That's right. Under normal circumstances, the spatial power above and below the sea should be about the same. But when we passed over the sea that day, I discovered that there seemed to be several forces intertwining with each other. It was extremely chaotic. Later on, when I thought about it, it was indeed a mark that Master deliberately left behind. Other than him, I don't know anyone else who can do such a thing. She furrowed her brows nervously. But this is only my guess. I have to go down and see for myself whether it's true or not. I just feel a little uneasy, so I came over to tell you. There's no need to guess. It should be true. Chu Luiyue softly interrupted her. Then, she briefly recounted what happened earlier. I was only suspecting it at first. But if even you say so, then this matter is most likely true. The room fell into a short dead silence. Mu Hongyu finally came back to her senses. But, who exactly did Master offend to be imprisoned under that sea? Anyone who had been to that sea knew what kind of shocking and ferocious power was hidden in the surging waves. Once a high god powerhouse fell into it, there would be nothing left of him in a few breaths' time. He wouldn't even have the time to struggle and ask for help. Even if Diwu Zhangze was stronger, he would definitely be tortured inhumanly if he was imprisoned in that place. Chu Luiyue didn't say anything. She had the same question in her mind. Not only Diwu Zhangzi, but also Dugu Maobao and Lan Xiao. The three of them were first trapped in the Red Moon Desert and didn't see the light of day for tens of thousands of years. Then, they were brought here and imprisoned separately. It wasn't that she didn't have any guesses. Dugu Maobao and the other two must have some kind of relationship with the illusory god palace or the illusory god palace. Because of some reason, they were punished like this. But now that she didn't have any more clues or evidence, she naturally couldn't make any guesses. Mu Hongyu suddenly grabbed her hand and whispered, "Don't worry. Lu Yu, I want to go down to that sea to take a look." Chu Luiyue frowned. "Now?" Mu Hongyu nodded. "But you're still a high god. If you go down rashly, I'm afraid, Master left a space under the sea. I can go there." Mu Hongyu said. Chu Luiyue's eyes lit up. "Really?" Mu Hongyu nodded. "So, the only problem now is that it's a bit difficult to get out of the Heavenly Gate. The Heavenly Gate of the illusory god palace was heavily guarded. It was almost impossible to leave quietly." Chu Luiyue thought for a while and said, "It's not difficult to get out. The difficult part is, how to not be discovered. Since Diwu Zhangzi was imprisoned there, there must be someone secretly watching over him." Rong Xiu suddenly said, "If your incorporeal body breaks through again, you'll be able to fool everyone." Chapter 2282. Mu Hongyu looked at Rong Xiu in surprise. "Your Highness, do you mean, Senior Diwu was in the Mahayana realm of the void body back then? Now that you're only in the minor realization realm, you naturally have many limitations. If you can break through to the Mahayana realm, you can cross all space barriers. At that time, not only will you be able to see Senior Diwu, but it's also possible to take him away quietly." Rong Xiu explained calmly. Chu Luiyue widened her eyes slightly. "Rong Xiu, how do you know all this? Mahayana realm, minor realization realm." She had never heard of it before. But looking at him, he seemed to know a lot about it. Rong Xiu smiled. "When I sent Senior Diwu's aura back, he told me all this." Chu Luiyue blinked. "Really? But I was in the Red Moon Desert for so long, and he never mentioned it." Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows. "Are you sure you had time to listen to him?" Chu Luiyue's lips twitched. No, at that time, she spent all her time and energy on those Xian formations and prescriptions. She worked so hard, but she still received criticism and disdain from Big Bao several times. Lan Xiao and Diwu Zhangzi couldn't even get a word in at that time, so how could they say all this? At first, the two of them tried to speak up for Chu Luiyue and let her relax a little, but Big Bao rebuked them with a few cold words. So in the end, the two of them ran away, leaving only the words, "Good luck," for her. Just thinking about it made her sad. Chu Luiyue rubbed between her eyebrows. "That's true." Mu Hongyu looked conflicted. "But, even the minor realization realm took me a lot of effort to break through. The Mahayana realm is simply out of reach. I'm afraid I won't be able to break through in such a short time." Previously, with Diwu Zhangzi's guidance, she could still improve faster, but now, she was almost fumbling around on her own. Rong Xiu paused. "Although the void physique is rare in the Divine Ruins world, I've heard that several Mahayana realm powerhouses have appeared in the illusory god palace. If he could obtain the incantations they left behind, he should be able to rapidly increase his cultivation." Mu Hongyu was dumbfounded. "But where can we find such a thing?" Chu Luiyue suddenly said, "I know where it is. Treasure Pavilion." Ming Shu raised his head in surprise. "You want the Mahayana cultivation method?" Chu Luiyue nodded. Does the treasure pavilion have this item? Ming Shu immediately smiled. Of course we do. It's just that it's been a long time since a cultivator with the void physique appeared in the Illusion God Palace. That's why the second boss ordered us to put these things away. If you want it, I can help you find it. Chu Luiyue heaved a sigh of relief. Thank you, Lord Ming. Ming Shu smiled. There's no need to thank me. However, Miss Shangwan, you don't seem to have the void physique. Did you ask for this lady? As he spoke, his eyes fell on Mu Hongyu, who was standing beside Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue didn't deny it and nodded with a smile. Yes. Ming Shu said, hee, please wait here for a while. I'll go up and get it for you. With that, he turned and went up to the second floor. On the huge first floor of the treasure pavilion, only Chu Luiyue and Mu Hongyu were left. Mu Hongyu's eyes widened, and she curiously scanned her surroundings. She was shocked. Lu Yu, there's a lot of good stuff here. She only took a cursory glance and saw many treasures that were rarely seen in the outside world. Chu Luiyue smiled. This is the largest store in the Illusion God Palace. There are countless collections, so it's naturally unusual. Mu Hongyu nodded in understanding, but her eyes were still filled with shock. However, this store is really interesting. It has the same name as Yao Chen's store. What a coincidence. I was also quite surprised when I first came here. However, most of the names of these stores are very similar, so it's not strange to have the same name. That's true. Mu Hongyu rubbed her chin. Yao Chen's store is worlds apart from this one. By the way, Lu Yu, I saw that Lord Ming's attitude towards you was really good. Didn't they say that even the divine envoys were afraid of the treasure pavilion? His status shouldn't be low, right? Yet, he was so polite to Lu Yu. It wasn't just polite, it was extremely eager. Those who didn't know would think that you were his master. Chu Luiyue smiled and knocked her forehead. Don't talk nonsense. It's not good for Lord Ming to hear. It's only because they chose me to help copy the Xian formation, so we're closer. Mu Hongyu stuck out her tongue. Then they have good taste, choosing you immediately. However, I wonder who the backer of this treasure pavilion is. In the Illusion God Palace, who has a more honorable identity than the divine envoys? A light suddenly flashed in Chu Luiyue's mind. To be able to make the divine envoys so afraid, wasn't it only the rumored emperor? Fengming Mountain. Dumpling stood at the top of the mountain. Her grape-like eyes were tightly shut, and her thick and long eyelashes were trembling slightly. A breeze blew over, rolling up the corners of her skirt. The golden bell on her head jingled. Under her feet, boundless and surging power was continuously pouring into her body. The aura around her was also rising. The totem between her eyebrows was faintly discernible. In front of her, the two-tian baby was also quietly growing. Unknowingly, another tender leaf had grown out, swaying with the wind. After an unknown period of time, Dumpling finally opened her eyes and let out a long breath. Her eyes were extremely bright, and in that instant, it was as if there were flames burning in them. After a while, they finally calmed down. Then, she stretched out her small hand, tidied up her skirt, and muttered softly. It's all messed up. Just at this moment, a rustling sound suddenly came from afar. She inadvertently raised her eyes to take a look and was instantly shocked. A blurry figure quickly flashed past her eyes. That was... Chapter 2283. Dumpling suddenly widened her eyes. She quickly took 2 steps forward, wanting to take a closer look, but the shadow had already disappeared from her line of sight. There was nothing in the air, as if nothing had ever appeared. Dumpling rubbed her eyes. Did I see wrongly? Why did she feel like she had seen it just now, but that was impossible? She frowned deeply. No matter how she thought about it, she felt that something was wrong. Let's wait for Ayu to come over and ask. She nodded thoughtfully. Whoosh, the sound of energy surging came from the side. She turned her head to look. The two-tian baby that she had buried earlier was gently shaking a few tender leaves. Although it was very small, it could still easily mobilize the surrounding heaven and earth energy. Perhaps it was because of this thing, she felt that the desolate and lonely aura of Fengming Mountain had lessened a lot. She walked over and gently touched it with her small hand. You have to grow up quickly. This place is so bare and looks so ugly. The two-tian baby shook gently. The clouds moved with the wind. Treasure Pavilion. After about 15 minutes, Mingshu came down from the second floor, holding an ebony box in his hands. He came in front of the two of them and presented the ebony box with both hands. He smiled and said, Miss Shangwan, Miss Mu, I'm sorry. This thing has been here for many years. It took me some effort to find it, so I'm late. Please take a look. Chu Liuyue's lips curved up. Lord Ming, you're too polite. We have a favor to ask of you. We should be the ones thanking you. As she spoke, she raised her chin at Hongyu. Hongyu, I don't know much about this thing. You should take a look. Mu Hongyu tried her best to suppress the excitement and curiosity in her heart as she took the ebony box. The box was not locked and could be opened directly. There was a book inside. Mu Hongyu took the book out and opened it. Her almond-shaped eyes instantly lit up. This is indeed a Mahayana cultivation technique. She looked at Chu Luyue and could no longer hide the smile on her face. Chu Luyue also laughed. The precious treasure pavilion was really amazing. They actually had. She looked at Zhang and asked. Lord Ming, may I know the price of this book? Before he could finish, Yu waved his hand with a smile. Miss Shangwan, Miss Mu, take this as a free gift from the treasure pavilion to the two of you. Chu Luyue and Mu Hongyu were both stunned. Free gift. Lord Ming, I'm afraid this isn't appropriate. Chu Luyue said hesitantly. One didn't need to think to know how precious this book was. The treasure pavilion actually gave it away just like that. No matter how generous he was, he shouldn't have come here like this, right? Mu Hongyu was also stunned. This shop is so lavish. He explained with a smile. The two of you may not know this, but the illusory god palace hasn't had an incorporeal body for more than 1,000 years. Even if we go back 10,000 years, there were only 3. However, those 3 people passed away before they could reach the initial realization realm. Miss Mu, if I'm not wrong, you just reached the initial realization realm, right? Mu Hongyu nodded. That's it. Miss Mu, you came from the Divine Ruins world and have already reached the initial realization realm at such a young age. Your future is almost limitless. It's only a matter of time before you reach the Mahayana realm. This thing is useless in our precious treasure pavilion. It's just going to be shelved and gather dust for no reason. However, if it's given to Miss Mu, it will be of great use. There was undisguised admiration in Ming Shu's eyes. Take this book as a gift from the treasure pavilion to you. Please don't stand on ceremony, Miss Mu. Mu Hongyu blinked. Was this because they were interested in her talent, so they were giving her this book as a sign of goodwill? But this was too precious. She instinctively looked at Chu Luyue. Chu Luyue pondered for a moment. The treasure pavilion's intention could not be more obvious, and it was reasonable. However, even if they thought highly of Mu Hongyu, it seemed a little overboard to give her a Mahayana realm cultivation art like this. As if seeing the two's hesitation, Ming Shu stroked his beard and smiled. Actually, the two of you don't have to be so troubled. The incorporeal body was an extremely rare cultivation body. Its cultivation method was poles apart from that of ordinary cultivators. Even if this book fell into their hands, they would not be able to understand it. To most people, this was not a treasure, but a meaningless book. Now that Miss Mu had this talent, they naturally could not waste it. In short, it was just a favor at no cost. Hearing him say this, Chu Luiyue could not refuse. After all, this was the purpose of their visit. In that case, thank you, Lord Ming. Mu Hongyu immediately smiled. Thank you, Lord Ming. Ming Shu chuckled. It's a small matter, not worth mentioning. I hope Miss Mu can successfully break through to the Mahayana realm as soon as possible. Chu Luiyue turned to look at Mu Hongyu. Hongyu, you go back first. There are still some Xian formations here that have not been copied. This could be considered a return gift to the treasure pavilion. Mu Hongyu responded and quickly left. Chu Luiyue then went up to the second floor. She had already deciphered all the Grand Xian King Master's Xian formations on the star path, and now only the Great Grandmaster's part was left. Chu Luiyue stayed in the room on the second floor for a long time. Not only did she copy all the Grand Xian King Master's Xian formations on the mythical flame diagram, she also tried to practice with a few Great Grandmaster's Xian formations. Although the difficulty had increased by a lot, everything was still going smoothly. It was just that it consumed a lot of time and energy. These were all small problems for the current Chu Luiyue. After she was done, she leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes to rest. Everything that happened just now was still replaying in her mind. The corners of her lips curled up. Now, she really wanted to meet the second master of the treasure pavilion, as well as the rumored first master. Mingshu's explanation just now did not sound wrong, but after thinking about it carefully, Chu Luiyue realized that there was actually a huge logical problem. It was understandable that the treasure pavilion wanted to rope in a genius like Mu Hongyu, who had the intangible body. But the key was, they did not have to do so. Yes, the intangible body was very rare, but Mu Hongyu was still in the initial realization realm. It was still uncertain whether she could break through to the Mahayana realm. Even if she really did break through to the Mahayana realm, the treasure pavilion did not seem to need to curry favor with her. After all, even the divine envoys had to be polite to them. The treasure pavilion, who had a powerful backer, did not need to curry favor with anyone. Suddenly, the sound of a door opening came from outside. Chu Luiyue stood up and walked outside. She was very fast. When she came out, she saw Mingshu walking out of a room at the end of the corridor. Through the half-open door, a figure was faintly discernible. Chu Luiyue narrowed her eyes slightly. Chapter 2284. Why does this figure look so familiar? Mingshu looked up and saw that Chu Luiyue had unknowingly walked out of the room. At this point, she was half leaning against the door frame with her arms crossed as she lazily looked over. His heart skipped a beat and he quickly turned to close the door. He then looked at Chu Luiyue again and laughed. Miss Shangguan, why did you come out so early? As he asked, Zhao was secretly shocked. Madame's strength seemed to have improved again. When she came out just now, he didn't notice at all. If he had known that he would bump into her when he came out, he would have been more careful. Chu Luiyue smiled faintly and asked, Nothing. It's just that I'm almost done copying the Xian formation this time and was about to go back. But I didn't see Madame Zhao, so I came out to take a look. Her gaze fell on the closed door behind Zhao. The person inside is second master. Mingshu couldn't deny it. Miss Shangguan is indeed intelligent. At this time, there weren't many people who could go up to the second floor. Zhao looked rather respectful when he came out. That person's identity was naturally clear. Chu Luiyue stepped forward and said, "Since it's such a coincidence today, then. Second Master, do you have time to meet me?" Her voice rose slightly. Although she was looking at Zhao, she was obviously talking to the person inside. When Yan Gu heard this from inside the room, his heart thumped wildly. He anxiously looked around for a suitable place to hide. Should he just run away? How did she see him? Logically speaking, she shouldn't be able to see anything with just one glance. But Madame had always been sharp-eyed and was very familiar with him. If she really saw something, Yan Gu secretly regretted it. Why did she call Zhao over at this time? It wouldn't be too late to talk about many things after Madame left. Just as he was panicking, Mingshu's voice came from outside. "This. Miss Shangwan, our second master's health. Second master hasn't recovered yet." Yes, second master is not very well now. He probably can't see you." Chu Luiyue smiled. "Isn't this a coincidence? I've just broken through to become a senior doctor some time ago, so I'm just in time to take the second master's pulse. Zhenbao Pavilion has helped me so much, I've always felt very apologetic. If he could do something for the second master, it would be great." Mingshu paused and spoke hesitantly. "Miss Shangwan, we appreciate your kindness, but second master has an old illness. I've already asked the medical sage to come over and take a look at him. There's no big problem, he just needs to rest well. You've just finished copying those profound formations, and I reckon that it's time for you to rest. How can I trouble you?" Chu Luiyue raised his eyebrows slightly and looked at Mingshu quietly. That pair of clear starry eyes carried a hint of scrutiny. Previously, she was only curious about this second master, but now, it had turned into suspicion. She just wanted to see him. Why was it so difficult? Judging from Zhenbao Pavilion's attitude, this second master definitely didn't hate her. Otherwise, he wouldn't help her like this. But he just didn't want to see her. The reason he gave really couldn't convince her. Moreover, that back view just now was indeed very familiar to her. Being stared at by her indifferent expression, Mingshu only felt his whole body tense up, and cold sweat kept breaking out on his back. After a long time, Chu Luiyue smiled and said, "Since it's still inconvenient for second master, then forget it." Mingshu heaved a long sigh of relief in his heart. "Thank you for your understanding, Miss Shangwan. If there's a chance in the future, second master will definitely treat you well." Chu Luiyue looked up slightly and said to the closed door, "Second master, just take care of yourself. I won't disturb you today." After saying that, she turned and went downstairs. Mingshu hurriedly went to send her off. Chu Luiyue stopped in her tracks and looked back with a smile. "Lord Mingshu, you don't have to send me off. If you have the time and energy, you'd better take care of second master. It's not good to keep resting like this, right?" Mingshu smiled awkwardly and could only stop and watch her leave. Chu Luiyue walked out of the treasure pavilion and looked back. The doors and windows on the second floor were tightly shut, and there was no movement at all. She curled the corners of her lips thoughtfully. Even if she didn't see him today, she would see him sooner or later. She wanted to see how long this second master was going to hide. Putting away her thoughts, she lifted her feet and walked in the direction of Fengming Mountain. The surroundings of the illusory god palace were always deserted, and it was the same today. Chu Luiyue came to the front of the barrier, took out the jade tablet that Yu Qian had given her, and placed it on the barrier. Wang, the barrier opened. She stepped in without hesitation. When she arrived at Fengming Mountain, Dumpling was sitting on the top of the mountain, holding her chin with one hand. Her cheeks were bulging, as if she was thinking about something. "Dumpling!" Chu Luiyue called out. Hearing the voice, Dumpling immediately looked up, and a big smile blossomed on her cute face. She quickly got up and ran over barefooted with her short legs. "Ah, you! Ah, you're here. As soon as Chu Luyue landed, Dumpling had already pounced on her. Her two hands were tightly wrapped around her neck, and her small head kept rubbing against her shoulder as she took a deep breath. Ah, you smell so good. She hadn't smelled this smell for a day and a night. Whoa. Chu Luyue didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Looking at her jubilant appearance, she felt her heart ache. Dumpling had always liked to be lively. Staying here alone would indeed be very uncomfortable for her. You also missed Dumpling very much, so she came over today. As she spoke, Chu Luyue kissed her chubby little face. Dumpling, how do you feel being here by yourself? The aura on your body seems to have strengthened. Chu Luyue's face revealed a look of surprise. How long had it been, and there was already such an obvious change? Dumpling pursed her lips. It's just like that. You is not here, so I'm not happy. She was bored, so she could only spend most of her time on cultivation and strive to open her meridians as soon as possible. Chu Luyue sighed in her heart. Fengming Mountain is indeed extraordinary. Dumpling's cultivation on this day had almost exceeded the previous few days. More importantly, because Fengming Mountain was originally the territory of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan's ancestors, Dumpling's cultivation here was extremely efficient, and there wouldn't be any hidden dangers. This was much better than forcefully opening her meridians. If this continued, she should really be able to open her 7th meridian very quickly. Oh right, I think I saw. Tuanzi suddenly thought of something. She hesitantly bit her finger and put it close to her ear. It seems to be, boom. Before Dumpling could finish her words, a loud sound suddenly came from the palace of the illusory god. Chu Luyue's heart tightened as she immediately looked up. Chapter 2285. Then, a reddish gold flame suddenly soared into the sky. The aura of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix. Chu Luyue murmured in shock. Dumpling also looked over. After being stunned for a moment, her small face suddenly frowned. That's the Great Elder. Chu Luyue looked at her with some surprise. Elder Yigong. Dumpling, are you sure? Of course. Dumpling gritted her teeth. I definitely won't be wrong about this kind of thing. It's him. And he's still trying to open his meridians. Chu Luyue's eyes flickered slightly. Dumpling had the purest bloodline and was already the young master. She knew the aura of all the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clansmen like the back of her hand. Of course, she wouldn't be wrong. And now, Yi Zhao was trapped in the Thunder Sea, and the rest of the clansmen were forcibly sealed in the Phoenix God Mountain by him. Only Yi Gong wasn't there. Other than him, there wouldn't be any other answer. So he's in the illusory God Palace. Chu Luyue had long suspected that there was something wrong with Yi Gong's disappearance. Now, it seemed that he was almost certain that he had betrayed the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. Otherwise, how could he have the capital to stay in the illusory God Palace to open his meridians at this time? A powerful summoning force came. A reddish gold light flashed in front of Dumpling. It was the ancestor's golden feather that was summoned by this force and was about to go there. Swoosh! Dumpling quickly flew out and grabbed the ancestor's golden feather back. Don't go. He wanted to open the 7th meridian. She wouldn't let him. The corner of Chu Luyue's eyes twitched. He never thought that Dumpling would have such a move. The ancestor's golden feather struggled in Dumpling's hand for a moment, then obediently stayed there. The purest bloodline summoning force was naturally stronger for the ancestor's golden feather. Tuanzi glared at her fiercely with a pair of big, grape-like eyes. I want to see how he's going to open his meridians this time. At this moment, Yi Gong, who was at a certain area of the illusory god palace, had finally noticed that something was off, and he suddenly opened his eyes. Something was wrong. Why hasn't Ancestor Jinyu appeared yet? Even though this was not the divine Phoenix Mountain, he was still a crimson gold heavenly phoenix and possessed a powerful bloodline. As long as he was preparing to open his meridians, no matter where he was, Ancestor Jinyu should have answered the summons. It seems that your talent is far inferior to hers. A gentle and deep voice came from behind. Yi Gong suddenly turned his head. The second divine envoy. Yu Qian raised his chin. Oh right, there's something I haven't told you yet. Dumpling is already at Feng Ming Mountain. The reason why you couldn't summon Ancestor Goldfeather should be because of her. Yi Gong was startled. Soon after, an unwillingness surged into his heart. How much had he sacrificed to open his seventh meridian? He had waited so long for this day, but it was forcefully interrupted just like that. From the second divine envoy's words, he actually admired Dumpling. Second divine envoy, although she has the purest bloodline, she broke through all the way from the nine-colored heavenly pheasant and followed Sheng Wanyu for several years. Her thoughts dash, none of this is important. Yu Qian interrupted him impatiently. She has the purest bloodline. That's enough. Something seemed to be surging in Yi Gong's chest. He felt extremely stifled. Yu Qian glanced at him. However, you don't have to care too much about this. As long as you can open your seventh meridian, what I said before still counts. Yi Gong took a deep breath. I know. It wasn't that he had no way. Because in this world, there wasn't only one ancestor golden feather. There was another one, and it was in this illusory god palace. He closed his eyes again and devoured the surrounding energy of heaven and earth in an even crazier manner. The crimson gold flames burned even more fiercely and completely surrounded him. A moment later, a buzzing sound came from somewhere in the illusory god palace. Immediately after, a crimson gold stream of light tore through the air. It was the ancestor golden feather that was used to register in the divine register. Sensing this aura approaching, Yi Gong made up his mind. This time, he had to open his seventh meridian no matter what. Ancestor golden feather. Sensing the commotion here, Dumpling immediately realized what had happened. Ah you, this is their one. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. Looks like Yi Gong has made up his mind this time, Dumpling smiled coldly. He's dreaming. As soon as she finished speaking, she tapped the ground with the tip of her foot and quickly flew over. Dumpling. Chu Luiyue was shocked and immediately went to pull her, but it was already too late. After Dumpling opened her sixth meridian, her strength had increased greatly. Now that she was anxious, she directly used her fastest speed. Chu Luiyue followed without hesitation. Dumpling quickly arrived in front of the barrier that descended from the sky. This barrier separated Phoenix Cry Mountain from the illusory god palace. It would be extremely difficult to pass through. Yi Gong heard the commotion and looked over. He sneered with a mocking gaze. Although the two were far away, they could still sense each other's gaze and expression. Dumpling gritted her teeth. You traitor. You betrayed Grandpa Patriarch, didn't you? Yi Gong snorted coldly. He was the one who was stubborn and wanted to lead the entire clan to death. I was just making the right choice for him. Dumpling spat. Bah! Who do you think you are? Yi Gong's expression changed. No one would be in a good mood after being insulted in public like this. But soon, his expression returned to normal. TSK. The purest bloodline. Young master. How awe-inspiring. Unfortunately, you're still trapped and can't break free. Who can you care about? As he spoke, the ancestor golden feather had already flown to his glabella. 6 reddish gold lines quickly appeared. As long as he drew the 7th line, he would successfully open his 7th meridian. Dumpling clenched her fists, and reddish gold flames instantly burned in her eyes. Almost at the same time, several lines appeared on her glabella. "You dare to snatch it from me?" As soon as he finished speaking, a terrifying aura suddenly erupted from Dumpling's body. The ancestor golden feather that was about to land on Igong's glabella suddenly trembled. Then it turned around and flew towards Tuanzi. "What?" Igong's expression changed and instantly turned pale. The purest bloodline could naturally snatch the ancestor golden feather. Chapter 2286. That ancestor's golden feather pierced through the air with the wind. Chi! Almost without stopping, it directly passed through the barrier in the middle and arrived in front of Dumpling in the blink of an eye. At this moment, 6 crimson gold lines had also been summoned from between her brows. The flowing light was like a burning flame. The ancestor's golden feather hung between her brows and slowly but firmly began to draw the 7th line. Dumpling. When Chu Luiyue saw this scene, her heart immediately rose to her throat. Dumpling had just opened her 6th meridian not long ago. Now that she was forcefully opening her 7th meridian, it would undoubtedly have a great impact on her. It was very likely that her body would not be able to withstand the impact of this terrifying pressure and vast power. Previously, it was not easy to help Dumpling recuperate her body. Now, Chu Luiyue's temples throbbed. She felt as if all the blood in her body had solidified at this moment. She wanted to step forward to stop it, but the ancestor's golden feather had already begun to carve the 7th line. If she rashly interrupted it now, the situation would not be any better. However, at this moment, Igong's mood was even worse. He could have successfully opened his meridians, but now it was all ruined. Bang! He furiously swung out a wave of power. The ground beneath his feet instantly cracked open. Crimson gold flames burned along the crack, leaving behind a charred mark. However, no matter how he vented his anger, he could no longer change the fact that had already happened. Dumpling had indeed easily snatched the ancestor's golden feather from him. This was not the first time such a thing had happened, but Igong had never imagined that there would be a day when it would actually happen to him. He was the first elder of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. However, when Yu Qian, who was standing not far away, saw this scene, his eyes shone as he exclaimed in amazement. The purest bloodline indeed lives up to its reputation. Dumpling and Igong had both opened their 6th meridian. However, not only was Dumpling able to firmly guard her original ancestor's golden feather, she was even able to directly snatch the 2nd one from Igong. Such bloodline power was completely overwhelming. If Dumpling could use this opportunity to open her 7th meridian, it would be killing several birds with one stone. At that time, would there still be a need for Palace? The ancestral golden feather pattern was extremely difficult to inscribe. Although Dumpling's bloodline power was unparalleled, the power she had accumulated in her body was not enough to support the opening of her 7th meridian channel. Therefore, this process became incomparably slow and difficult. The surrounding heaven and earth energy began to crazily pour into her body. Chu Luiyue's eyebrows twitched violently. She was really worried that the same thing that happened in the Red Moon Desert would happen again. But gradually, she realized that the situation was a little strange. Dumpling continued to devour the energy, but from the beginning to the end, she did not show any signs of pain. Her body was like a sponge, continuously absorbing this power, but there seemed to be no end to it. On the contrary, her aura became stronger and stronger, and her eyes became brighter and brighter. Her entire body was enveloped in pure golden flames, and the scorching heat almost set the air ablaze. Hula, the sound of surging tides could be heard. Chu Luiyue turned around to look. She saw that on the top of Fengming Mountain not far away, there were clearly many two Tian babies swaying in the wind, sending boundless energy over. A resplendent pattern slowly appeared between Dumpling's eyebrows. Chu Luyue held her breath. Could it be, was it because this was Fengming Mountain? When she first came here, she had already noticed that the power here was different from the outside world. Dumpling especially liked it. But at that time, she did not pay too much attention to it. She only thought that it was because this was the place where the crimson gold heavenly phoenix ancestor had stayed. As a junior, Dumpling would behave like this. But now it seemed. Forcefully opening her meridians is just courting death. Now that she is not yet an adult and is so rash, the final result will not be any better. Yi Gong clenched his fists and said hatefully. As soon as he finished speaking, he felt a cold gaze land on him. He was shocked and turned his head to look, only to see Yu Qian looking at him coldly and mockingly. Yi Gong, although you have done a good job in reporting him, it does not mean that you can do whatever you want in the illusory God Palace. You'd better know what you can say and what you can't say. Otherwise, I think Yi Zhao would be happy for you to accompany him. Yu Qian's voice was an undisguised warning. Yi Gong choked and wanted to defend himself, but in the end, he gave up. He gritted his teeth so hard that they almost broke. Finally, he said, I will follow the second divine envoy's instructions. He lowered his eyes, hiding the resentment and killing intent in his eyes. So what if he didn't want him to say it? These were all facts. Just wait and see. If he forced it like this, he would only bring about his own destruction. Half of the line between Dumpling's eyebrows had finally been drawn. However, at this moment, the ancestor's golden feather suddenly stopped and did not continue. The remaining half was like a heavenly moat that was difficult to cross. Chu Luyue frowned slightly. Dumpling's face was flushed red. She clenched her fists and stared at the ancestor's golden feather in front of her. Continue. The seventh meridian was only half opened. However, no matter how she urged, the ancestor's golden feather could not continue. Because of the long pause, it even trembled faintly, as if it would fly away at any time. Seeing this scene, Chu Liyue's heart sank. This was the sign of a failed meridian opening. Suddenly stopping in the middle of opening a meridian was the worst. Because once it stopped, it would be as difficult as ascending to the heavens to continue opening meridian. Even if it could continue, how could she ensure that the two meridian openings were completely compatible? If it could not be done in one go, mistakes would be inevitable. Without a doubt, this would be a fatal blow. Even if Dumpling had the purest bloodline, she could not avoid this problem. Dumpling seemed to have realized the seriousness of the matter and urged the power into her body even more crazily. However, at this moment, her body had already reached its limit. She was unable to control such a terrifying force. The ancestor's golden feather began to tremble violently. The situation had taken a turn for the worse. The smile on Yu Qian's face had completely disappeared and his brows were tightly knitted. He had spent so much effort to keep Dumpling at Fengming Mountain. If he were to lose just like that, wouldn't all his efforts be for naught? Most importantly, if she was crippled, then where were they going to find another person with the purest bloodline? Seeing this, Yi Gong's lips curled into a cold smile. He had already said that this was absolutely impossible. Even if she could snatch the ancestor's golden feather away, so what? She would never be able to successfully open her meridian without any preparation. If the seventh meridian was really so easy to open, Yi Zhao wouldn't be the only one in the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan who had done it for so many years. At this moment, the ancestor's golden feather flew away. Dumpling's body trembled and she spat out a mouthful of blood. Digression, I saw the comments saying that Dumpling's real name is Yituan. Chapter 2287. Dumpling. Chu Liyue's heart sank. Just as she was about to move, a black figure was faster than her. She paused. Ziqin. Ziqin pulled Dumpling into his arms. Then, almost without hesitation, he cut open Dumpling's palm. Chi! A dark red line of blood flew out. A drop of warm blood landed on his handsome and cold face. His expression did not change. He quickly wiped away the blood with his thumb and put it between his lips to suck on it. Then, he cut open his own palm and overlapped it with Dumpling's palm, holding it tightly. The majestic aura that almost overflowed from Dumpling's body flowed out along the blood and into Ziqin's body. The blazing energy was like flowing fire, spreading through his muscles, bones, and blood vessels, burning every inch of his body. The bone-piercing, scalding pain surged from all parts of his body. He frowned slightly, but did not make the slightest sound of pain. The crazy energy was absorbed by Ziqin, and Dumpling's body gradually recovered. She opened her eyes in a daze and saw a familiar face. She was stunned. Ziqin. Continue to open your meridians. Ziqin's voice was as cold as ever, but at this moment, it inexplicably calmed Dumpling down. I'll help you. Chu Luyue, who was standing at the side, saw Ziqin's actions and finally realized what he was planning to do. She immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. Ziqin. Was he crazy? If Dumpling wanted to open her meridians, she had to absorb enough heaven and earth energy to temper her body. However, she had just opened her 6th meridian. Now, she did not make any preparations. It was almost equivalent to using force. Of course, her body could not bear it. Even if the energy here was extremely beneficial to her cultivation, it was still very difficult. The reason why the ancestor's golden feather was cut off just now was because Dumpling could no longer accommodate any more heaven and earth energy. If it was full, it would overflow. Just relying on herself was definitely not enough. At this moment, Ziqin stepped forward and channeled all the power that Dumpling could not bear into his body through the method of merging their bloodlines. This greatly reduced the pressure on Dumpling. At the same time, he could also reorganize this energy and slowly channel it back into Dumpling's body, repeatedly tempering her body. In this way, Dumpling would be able to utilize the power to its fullest extent without exceeding the limits of what it could withstand. The only drawback was that this process would be extremely difficult for Ziqin. The Yu Qian had said before that even the Crimson Gold Celestial Phoenix clansmen might not be able to withstand the power here. Let alone Ziqin. However, at this time, there was no one more suitable than Ziqin. Because no matter what, half of the Great Phoenix Dragon's bloodline power still flowed in his body. And this was also the foundation of how he could help Dumpling. If it were any other divine beast, they would have already exploded and died. So, it had to be Ziqin. Dumpling also immediately understood this point and suddenly widened her eyes. But Ziqin held her hand tightly. Compared to his broad and well-defined palm, Dumpling's fleshy little hand was especially small. When their palms touched, there was a faint smell of blood. Dumpling gritted her teeth and nodded seriously. Okay. Since they had already reached this step, they had to succeed no matter what. She closed her eyes and held her breath. The ancestor, Goldfeather, who had just flown away, had already reached the edge of the barrier. Sensing the movement on Dumpling's side, it swayed a few times and finally flew back again. More and more power poured into Dumpling's body. After tempering her body, it poured into Ziqin's body again. After being refined by him again, it finally returned to Dumpling's side. This cycle repeated over and over again. Because of the intense pain, Ziqin's body was trembling slightly. However, from the beginning to the end, he never stopped, allowing the boiling and majestic power to wrap around his body. Finally, the ancestor's golden feather arrived in front of Dumpling's glabella again. How is this possible? Everything that happened in front of him shocked Yi Gong. The corners of his eyes and the tips of his brows still had a cold and mocking smile. However, before his smile could fully spread, the situation suddenly reversed. His expression was particularly ugly. Yu Qian was also completely shocked. He originally thought that Dumpling might really not be able to make it this time, but who knew? Yi Gong took a deep breath. No problem, no problem. Even if Dumpling recalled the ancestor's golden feather again, it was impossible for her to follow the previous traces and continue to open meridians perfectly. Such a problem during meridian opening would undoubtedly affect her future cultivation. Even if she had the purest bloodline, she would definitely stop at the 7th meridian. Thinking of this, Yi Gong's mood finally improved. However, the next scene completely shocked him. Because that ancestor's golden feather had actually opened Dumpling's meridians from the beginning. An incomparably resplendent reddish-gold pattern slowly and firmly appeared between Dumpling's glabella, easily covering half of the previous pattern. At the same time, somewhere in the illusory god palace, a shadow flew over quickly and pounced into the thick layer of fallen leaves in the cold and silent courtyard. After a moment, a low and indifferent voice came out from within. I told you long ago, now is not the time to go to Phoenix Cry Mountain. Under the piled-up fallen leaves, something surged for a moment, then quickly calmed down. A gentle breeze blew, and a few fallen leaves flew down. It was as if nothing had happened. In the depths of the lightning pool, Yi Zhao, who had been trapped for a long time, suddenly opened his eyes and looked up at a certain place. This aura, Dumpling had opened the 7th meridian. Countless emotions surged in his eyes. He lowered his head and looked at the black chains around his body, a trace of determination flashing across his eyes. Boom! A cluster of reddish gold flames suddenly burned. Digression, the afternoon sun is so good, I want to lie down and rest. After it's over, I can enjoy an entire afternoon of sunshine. Chapter 2288. The scarlet gold flames and the golden Tianlei intertwined, creating a dazzling light that illuminated the depths of the lightning pool. The black chains were wrapped in blazing flames, and they began to tremble violently. Whoosh! The chains tightened, as if they were about to strangle Yi Zhao to death. Mu Dongyu, who was meditating nearby, noticed the commotion. She immediately opened her eyes and looked towards the direction where the flames were shooting into the sky. The power around Yi Zhao had already begun to burn wildly, and the thick smell of blood permeated the air. Mu Dongyu's heart sank, and she immediately ran in that direction. This Yi Zhao is crazy. At the same time, the cultivators in the lightning pool also sensed that something was wrong. The flickering Tianlei became inexplicably restless, and they began to wander around in a frenzy. Several cries of pain came from the lightning pool. Then, one figure after another quickly escaped and ran to the shore. The people standing on the shore were shocked by this scene, and they quickly retreated. The lightning pool is exploding. It was unknown who shouted loudly, but his voice was filled with panic. The people who escaped quickly looked battered and exhausted. Some of them couldn't dodge in time, and their bodies were covered in wounds. Blood dripped, and their flesh was mangled. Look! A man standing on a reef suddenly pointed forward. Everyone subconsciously looked in the direction he was pointing, and they all gasped in unison. Within the vast and boundless lightning pool, countless silver heavenly lightning bolts seemed to have been summoned by something and were rapidly converging towards the center of the pool. Because there were too many of them, these Tianlei collided fiercely with each other, and sparks flew everywhere. However, their speed was not affected in the slightest. It was precisely because of this that many cultivators couldn't help but be affected by the shock waves and suffer injuries of varying degrees. How could this be? In the dead silence, someone couldn't help but mutter, his eyes full of shock. No one answered. This was a problem they had no answer to. Even though some of them had been in the illusory god palace for thousands of years, they had never seen such a scene. There are still people who haven't come out. Song Qing, who had finally escaped from the water, had just reached the shore. He looked back and said worriedly. From where they were, they could still see a few figures struggling in the lightning pool, trying to make their way over. However, at this moment, all the Tianlai cultivators were rushing towards the center. Their actions were no different from going against the flow and were extremely dangerous. One had to know that when the Tianlai was in its normal state, its destructive power was already terrifying enough. Many people had to be careful when they entered the Tianlai lake. If he was not careful, it was very likely that he would return with injuries. And now, with the Tianlai riots, the level of danger had increased by several times. Not to mention coming out unscathed, even coming out alive was a problem. Help! Sure enough, a panicked cry for help soon came from the lightning pool. The people standing on the shore looked at each other. Song Qing took a step forward hesitantly. But in the end, he looked at the injuries on his body and stopped. It wasn't easy for him to get out. If he went back, he might not be able to get out himself, let alone save people. Soon, a few waves surged over and quickly swallowed those figures. Only a few of them were still struggling. I beg you all. Help. This time, Song Qing heard it clearly. It was Qing Pei's voice. He frowned. Ever since Qing Pei found out that the Tianlai lake could refine the divine body, it was as if he was addicted and came here frequently. Gradually, he was no longer satisfied with staying at the edge of the Tianlai lake. He started to try to go in bit by bit. Even if doing so caused him to be in a sorry state and covered in injuries, compared to the power he gained, it was not worth mentioning. Song Qing had previously advised him not to do so. Although refining the divine body in the Tianlai lake could increase one's strength quickly, the effect was limited and there were also disadvantages. Using this method once or twice was no problem, but it was too much to do it too often. If one wanted to become stronger, it was best to cultivate diligently. But why would Qing Pei listen to him? He desperately wanted to become stronger, especially after hearing about Chu Liuyue's matters recently. The fire in his heart burned brighter and brighter, and he couldn't wait to unleash all of his potential so that he could trample on her. That was why he ignored his safety and went into the depths of the Tianlai lake. Who knew that he would run into such a shocking change? With such a scene, those who have not come out are probably dead. The fourth divine envoy is still in the depths of the Tianlai lake. Will he help them? I'm afraid it's hard to say. The Tianlai lake is rioting. With such a commotion, how could the fourth divine envoy have the time and energy to care about these things? That's true. There seems to be someone over there. Is that Mitsui? It should be him, right? Hasn't he been coming here every day recently? And every time, he goes in deeper than the others. But why do I feel that the Tianlai lake is not a threat to him? Look! He's coming here. Mitsui's name had been very famous in the Tianlai lake recently. Not only because he came here often, but because every time he came, he would go into the depths of the Tianlai lake and stay there for a long time. More importantly, he had never been injured even once. Everyone saw that every time he came out, he was stronger than before. Moreover, he did not seem to be in pain at all. He was always in high spirits. As time passed, people did not even have the heart to be jealous of him. Because sometimes, you can't compare yourself to a pervert. And this time, when so many cultivators were trapped in the Tianlai lake and were tortured, facing the danger of death, he was still as calm as ever. Mitsui was originally using his small hammer to hit a rock, but halfway through, he realized that something was wrong. When he saw the Tianlai Lake around him rushing into the depths of the Tianlai Lake, his first reaction was to follow them. But when he remembered that he had been warned by the fourth divine envoy, he gave up on this idea and turned to leave. He strode through the Tianlai Lake. Countless silver Tianlai lakes surged past him, but they all tactfully avoided him. As a result, Shijing did not encounter any obstructions or threats as he smoothly made his way to the shore. Help! Help me! As he walked, he heard a cry for help. Mitsui turned his head to look. Oh, someone familiar. At this moment, Ching-pei saw Mitsui clearly. His expression froze. However, it was only for a moment before he continued to shout. Mitsui! As long as you save me, I won't save you. Mitsui said crisply, then turned and left without any hesitation. What a joke! How Ching-pei treated their master before, he had forgotten, but Mitsui did not forget. Save him. The fact that he didn't step forward to step on them was already a sign of his benevolence. Chapter 2289. Ching-pei felt as though he had fallen into an ice cave. Actually, if it wasn't for the fact that he had no other choice, he wouldn't have put aside his pride to ask Shijing for help. Wasn't there no other way? He had only been trapped here for a short while, but his body was already riddled with wounds from the terrifying Tianlai. There wasn't a single spot on his body that wasn't damaged. If this continued, it wouldn't be long before he would really be buried here. It wasn't that he didn't try to leave by himself, but he realized that it was impossible. With his current strength, it was as difficult as ascending to the heavens to go against the surging tide. However, Shijing was different. He didn't know why. Perhaps it was because of his special physique or some other reason, but in short, he was clearly much more relaxed than the others in this lightning pool. Ignoring the previous events, just now, everyone was in a sorry state because of this sudden change, but Shijing was still walking as though it was flat ground. Other than him, Ching-pei didn't know who else he could ask for help. He clenched his teeth and shouted, Shijing. In any case, we came to this illusory god palace together. Are you really not willing to help at all? Shijing snorted coldly. I came here on my own. Who came with you? Besides, aren't you very stubborn? Then go on your own. I heard that when you wanted to cross that sea, you asked my master to help you. After my master rejected you, you still hold a grudge in your heart and remember it until now. Ching-pei, I say, you're already so old. How can you be so shameless? Ching-pei was speechless from the rebuke. His face was pale. After Shijing finished speaking, he continued walking toward the shore. People like you deserve to be taught a lesson. You dash. Just as Ching-pei was about to say something, several bolts of heavenly lightning converged to form a tidal wave, surging towards this side at lightning speed. Shijing was in front of him and bore the brunt of it. However, just as Ching-pei thought that Shijing was going to be swallowed, he saw Shijing raise the hammer in his hand and swing it casually. Whoosh! An invisible force surged out from within, and the surging silver heavenly lightning seemed to be affected by it as it quickly scattered in all directions. After passing Shijing, they quickly gathered together again and rushed over with the wind and waves. Its aura was even more ferocious than before. Shock flashed through Ching-pei's eyes. How could this be? These heavenly thunders seemed to be under Shii's command and were under his control. As if sensing his gaze, Shijing suddenly turned around and glanced in his direction. The brows on his tanned and rough face twitched. Soon after, he revealed a smile. Ching-pei suddenly realized something. You, whoosh. As soon as he opened his mouth, he didn't even have the time to say the rest of his words before the surging and terrifying wave had already surged over and swallowed him in an instant. Then, his figure was quickly annihilated by the countless dazzling heavenly thunders. Mitsui weighed the hammer in his hand. It was still useful. Fortunately, he didn't make much of a move just now. Other than Ching-pei, no one else should have seen it. He rubbed his nose and turned to walk toward the shore. When they arrived at the edge of the lightning pool, the amount of Tianlei here had greatly decreased. It was very thin. Shii jumped up and returned to the shore effortlessly. The gazes of the surrounding people all gathered on him. As expected, after all the twists and turns, he was still unharmed. Many people looked at each other. Previously, they had thought that it was because of his strong physical body that he was able to withstand the Tianlei so easily. But now, this explanation was clearly not enough. Out of so many people, some were dead, some were injured, but he was the only one who was able to walk out from the depths of the lightning pool unscathed. Did this not mean that there was a problem? However, Shii didn't care about the various gazes of the people around him. He tidied his slightly messy clothes, gripped the hammer in his hand tightly, and turned back to look at the lightning pool. The endless Tianlei was still surging toward the depths. Looking from afar, they could only see a bright light flashing between the dark sky and the earth. Shii frowned. Could it be that something had happened in the forbidden area deep within the lightning pool? Just as this thought flashed through his mind, a loud roar suddenly sounded. Rumble, this voice came from the depths of the lightning pool, deep and heavy. Everyone felt as if something was crushing down on their hearts, making it difficult for them to breathe. Some of the weaker ones immediately spat out blood, their faces pale. Seeing this scene, everyone's heart sank. This time, I'm afraid that something serious is going to happen. Following this, a pure gold flame shot up from the lightning pool into the sky. Surrounded by the resplendent silver light, the reddish-gold flame appeared incomparably dazzling. The moment it appeared, it lit up half the sky. At this moment, everything in the surroundings seemed to have dimmed. Even the silver Tianlei couldn't compete with it in terms of brightness. The next moment, the flame was like magma, crazily surging in all directions. The flame was molten, bright, and unstoppable. Large swathes of heavenly lightning were engulfed, and crimson golden flames spread out. Looking at this scene, it seemed like it was going to overturn the lightning pool. Everyone was shocked by this scene, their hearts trembling, and they fell into a dead silence. Waves of heat surged, even the air became hot. Song Qing, who was standing at the front, finally regained his senses and took a few steps back in horror. This is the aura of the crimson gold sky phoenix. Without a doubt, such a noble pure gold color, such a terrifying power, who else could it be other than the crimson gold sky phoenix? This sound also quickly woke up the surrounding people. Crimson gold sky phoenix. Isn't that the sinners of the illusory god palace? Why would it appear here? Since tens of thousands of years ago, when the ancestors of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan betrayed the illusory god palace, the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix had never appeared here. Who knew that such a terrifying aura would suddenly surge out from the depths of the lightning pool? Could it be that below? Screech. While everyone was panicking, the cry of a phoenix could be heard all of a sudden, which echoed between the heavens and earth. This phoenix cry also pierced through the clouds and wind, arriving at the illusory god palace and Phoenix Cry Mountain. At this moment, the seventh line between Dumpling's eyebrows was nearing its end. Hearing this familiar voice, her heart instantly tightened. The ancestors' golden feathers trembled violently. Chu Liuyue's heart sank, and he looked in the direction of the sound. The sound came from the lightning pool. What was Yizhao doing? Before he could figure it out, a painful groan suddenly came from behind him. Chu Liyue turned back and saw that Yigong in the distance seemed to be bound by an invisible rope, and his body was uncontrollably rushing toward the lightning pool. Chapter 2290. His body was engulfed in golden flames and was burning fiercely. His entire body was like a ball of fire as he quickly rushed in that direction. Chu Liuyue's eyes narrowed slightly, but a trace of doubt welled up in his heart. Yi Gong was the great elder of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. The power of his bloodline was extremely strong. Logically speaking, he shouldn't be in such pain from being burned by his own flames. But at this moment, he seemed to have completely lost control of the power in his body. Could it be because of Yi Zhao? Almost at the same time, on the other side, the seventh line on Dumpling's forehead was finally completed. Boom! A majestic and terrifying aura suddenly erupted from her body. She abruptly opened her eyes, and her pupils were completely filled with a scarlet gold stream of fire. Even Chu Luyue felt a tightness in his chest at this moment. That aura seemed to have surged over from ancient times and covered the sky and earth. Zichen was standing closest to them and was immediately hit by this terrifying power. His chest trembled, and blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. Dumpling immediately retracted her aura. She grabbed Zichen's hand tightly and poured the power in her body into his. The pure and powerful energy warmed his muscles, bones, and blood. Zichen licked the blood from the corner of his mouth with the tip of his tongue and shook his head. "I'm fine." He looked steadily at Dumpling. Saving Yi Zhao was more important. There was no need for words. With just a look, they could quickly understand each other's meaning. Dumpling's small face was filled with a rare solemnity. She nodded slightly, and then with a tap of her foot, she chased after Yi Gong. Chu Luyue immediately called Zichen back. In order to help Dumpling open her meridians, he had suffered an extremely shocking power impact. He would probably need to rest for a period of time to recover. As for what happened next, swoosh. The sound of something breaking through the air swept over their heads. It was Yu Qian who couldn't hold back and followed after them. Chu Luyue moved and followed closely behind. The huge commotion caused by the explosion of the thunder pool caused the entire illusory god palace to become restless. Countless cultivators were alarmed and rushed over. At this moment, the people standing on the shore of the lightning pool were hesitating whether or not they should flee. Seeing the scarlet gold flames surging towards them, those who were standing nearby were also greatly affected. Some people couldn't take it anymore and started to retreat. Shijing looked into the distance and gradually tightened his grip on the hammer in his hand. It was as if something was surging in his chest, ready to burst out at any moment. At this time, Mu Dongyu had already arrived at the forbidden area. However, it was already too late. There was a hole at the top of the ball of light formed by the interweaving golden lightning. The raging golden flames were rushing out from this hole. Yi Zhao, who was trapped within, was now completely surrounded by flames. The terrifyingly high temperature made it impossible for Mu Dongyu to approach. "Yi Zhao. You're crazy." Mu Dongyu's voice was stern. Yi Zhao had chosen to immolate himself. Only in this way could the flames break through the shackles of the golden Tianlei. Every strand of power in his body, every inch of his muscles, bones, and flesh, would turn into flames that would devour the heavens and earth. Yi Zhao lowered his head, as if he didn't hear his voice, or perhaps he did and didn't care. He allowed the flames around him to burn crazily, as if they wanted to burn everything to nothing. Mu Dongyu was burning with anxiety. He wanted to stop Yi Zhao, but it was clearly impossible for him to do so with his own strength. However, Yi Zhao couldn't die. At the very least, he had to live. Mu Dongyu raised his hand and waved, wanting to gather the surrounding Tianlei again and isolate Yi Zhao's flames. But soon, he found that he had lost control of the Tianlei. How can this be? Mu Dongyu was shocked. He saw that not only the golden Tianlei, but even the silver Tianlei that was surging from all directions had gone out of control and were crazily strangling him, and then sending all this power to Yi Zhao. The ancient mythical beasts could devour the Tianlei and turn it into divine power. As the fourth oracle, Mu Dongyu stayed in the lightning pool all year round and had absolute control over all the Tianlei here. He had never encountered a situation like this before. Mu Dongyu's heart beat rapidly. He knew very well that if this continued, the situation would completely go out of control in no time. At that time, Yi Zhao would either die or escape from here. Thinking of this, he turned around and left without hesitation, intending to find the other oracles and suppress him together. However, as soon as he moved, the surrounding Tianlei surged over one after another, making it difficult for him to move as if he was trapped in a swamp. Mu Dongyu sucked in a breath of cold air. This lightning pool was really like seeing a ghost. Chi! Just as Mu Dongyu was entangled with the Tianlei, a ball of fire suddenly fell and quickly converged on him. He subconsciously looked up, and his pupils constricted. Yi Gong! Wasn't he in the palace of the illusory god? How could, suddenly, he thought of something, and he swiftly turned around to look at Yi Zhao. As the clan leader, if he sacrificed himself, he could naturally summon his clansmen. Although Yi Gong had betrayed the phoenix godly mountain, he was still a crimson gold sky phoenix. Every drop of blood flowing in his body was still filled with deep reverence for the highest existence of the crimson gold sky phoenix clan. If Yi Zhao wanted him dead, he definitely couldn't live. Chi! Trapped by the flames, Yi Gong fell into the ball of light surrounded by the golden Tianlei and arrived in front of Yi Zhao. Mu Dongyu clenched his fists. However, at this moment, another small figure rushed over quickly and rushed in without hesitation. He was shocked. It was the aura of someone who had opened the seventh meridian. At this moment, the golden flames suddenly rose. Chapter 2291. Her line of sight was completely blocked. The reddish-gold flames burned wildly, almost filling up the light sphere that surrounded the entire golden Tianlei, leaving no gaps. As for the three figures inside, they were also swallowed up, and not a trace of them could be seen. Mu Dongyu was about to step forward, but the surrounding Tianlei seemed to be affected by the power of the flames and became even more violent. Streaks of silver light flowed past him in all directions, intertwining and colliding with each other. It was chaotic, making it difficult for him to move. Mu Dongyu frowned. Yi Zhao was the clan leader, and he had already opened his seventh meridian. If he really made a decision, he could not be underestimated. He swung his arm and suddenly threw the spear in his hand. Swoosh! That long spear carried an extremely sharp attack power and instantly broke through the waves. Some of the heavenly thunders that were closer to him were forcefully dispersed and even exploded. Chu Luiyue followed closely behind Yu Qian, heading straight for the lightning pool. Before she arrived, she saw a reddish gold flame from afar. It was burning into the sky and flowing continuously into the surroundings. At a glance, it looked like boiling magma spewing out from the bottom of the sea, covering and swallowing everything. A trace of shock flashed past her eyes, and she subconsciously held her breath. Even though she had already predicted what would happen here before she came, the scene before her eyes was still far beyond her imagination. This terrifying power all came from Yi Zhao. Was he planning to go all out? Yu Qian was even faster than her. In the blink of an eye, he arrived at the edge of the lightning pool. When he saw everything in front of him, his face completely darkened, and he clenched his fists tightly in his sleeves. Yi Zhao was courting death. But now was not the time for him to die. Besides, Dumpling was still down there. She had just opened her seventh meridian. If Yi Zhao went crazy and did something, the second divine envoy is here. A sharp-eyed person below saw Yu Qian and immediately exclaimed. As soon as he finished speaking, many people raised their heads and looked over with different expressions. The second divine envoy, Yu Qian, had absolute authority in the illusory god palace. Especially in the past few years, the first messenger had been in seclusion and had given Yu Qian full authority over many things. Naturally, Yu Qian's power and influence was even greater. However, unlike the other divine envoys, he spent most of his time in the illusory shrine and rarely came out. It was extremely difficult for everyone to see him. Now that the lightning pool was rioting, the commotion was shocking. Naturally, he needed to come out and take charge of the situation. Hearing the exclamations of the people around him, Mitsui also looked up, but then his gaze fell on Chu Luiyue, who was not far behind Yu Qian. Master! He waved at Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue moved and arrived in front of Mitsui. Eschai, how are you? Chu Luiyue asked with a frown. She knew that Eschai had been coming here often recently. She was worried that the lightning pool's riot would affect him. Eschai grinned. Master, don't worry. I'm fine. These words attracted the attention of the surrounding people, and their mouths twitched. This master and servant pair was too interesting. They were clearly fierce people who had been to the depths of the lightning pool, but now they were asking how he was. What could a person like Eschai do? Even if everyone here died in the lightning pool, there wouldn't even be a scar on his body. Seeing that Eschai was full of energy and vigor, Chu Luiyue was slightly relieved. What's going on over there? As she spoke, she raised her chin. You're talking about the ball of fire that suddenly appeared in the lightning pool. Eschai immediately gave a simple explanation of the situation, and also told her that Qing Pei had died in the lightning pool. Chu Luiyue did not even bat an eyelid. He was just reaping what he had sown. She had never taken such a person to heart. What she cared about the most now was Yi Zhao and Dumpling. The fourth divine envoy has not come out. No. Eschai thought for a moment and said. When the incident happened, the fourth divine envoy should have gone over immediately. At that time, although he was still quite a distance away, he could vaguely sense a familiar energy fluctuation. If he guessed correctly, it was the fourth divine envoy, Mu Dongyu. Chu Luiyue nodded. Mu Dongyu had been in charge of watching over the lightning pool, so it was expected that she would do this. But, it's been a while since the incident happened. Why doesn't it have any intention of stopping? Chu Luiyue couldn't help but mutter softly. Eschai laughed. How can you block it with that little bit of heavenly lightning? Chu Luiyue frowned and glanced at him. Why did Shi's tone sound like he was very familiar with the situation in the lightning pool? She hesitated for a moment and said slowly, after all, that is the fourth divine envoy. The Tianlei here is under his control. Shi scratched his head and lowered his voice. Master, I'm afraid that might not be the case. Chu Luiyue looked straight into his eyes. Oh. Previously, when Shi brought Tianlei back, she felt that something was wrong. However, at that time, her mind was on Chang Wanzhou, so she didn't think too much about it. She just thought that it was because of Shi's special constitution. His hammer was originally a lightning hammer, which could devour the power of Tianlei. But now, things seemed to be different from what she expected. Shii didn't notice the subtle change in her expression and continued. That's right. Under the lightning pool, before he could finish speaking, Yu Qian's body moved and rushed directly into the lightning pool. His speed was extremely fast, and before anyone could see his movements clearly, he had already disappeared. In an instant, countless Tianlei surged over with the reddish-gold flames. Chu Luiyue made up her mind and rushed over with the tip of her foot. Master, Shi wanted to stop him, but unfortunately, he didn't make it in time. Just as he was about to rush forward, he saw the surging lightning pool. He frowned and stopped in his tracks. Almost subconsciously, he tightened his grip on the hammer in his hand again. Plop! Chu Luyue dived into the lightning pool and directly dived into the depths. Here, she could already see a ball of reddish-gold flames burning below, mixed with golden tianlei. Clusters of flames were spreading rapidly with that place as the center. Yi Zhao, Dumpling, and Yi Gong were all in it at this moment. Chu Luyue pursed her lips tightly. If she wanted to save Yi Zhao, now was the only chance. Chi! A sharp aura suddenly appeared. She focused her eyes and saw that it was a long spear. It was Mu Dongyu's item. Chu Luyue turned around and easily dodged it. Then, the long spear finally rushed out of the lightning pool. Buzz! The buzzing sound spread far and wide. Chu Luyue narrowed her eyes slightly. This was the fourth oracle warning the other oracles. With a twist of her waist, she nimbly and swiftly rushed towards the ball of flame. At this moment, in the cage formed by the golden tianlei, Yi Gong was looking at Yi Zhao in front of him in horror. Yi Zhao looked at him coldly. Yi Gong, do you admit to the crime of betraying the clan? Chapter 2292. Every word was like a boulder that smashed heavily into Yi Gong's heart. He held his breath, and all the blood in his body seemed to have stopped flowing at this moment. The surrounding flames burned, and the temperature was clearly extremely hot, but he broke out in a cold sweat. It wasn't guilt, but fear. The current Yi Zhao could really kill him directly. Clan leader, I'm doing this for the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. Yi Gong spoke with difficulty to defend himself. If I don't do this, then our entire clan will die. Clan leader, do you really have the heart to do this? You admit it. Yi Zhao's voice was terrifyingly cold and calm. As the great elder, you should know best what kind of punishment is for betraying the clan. Do you want to do it yourself, or do you want me to help you? Yi Gong's heart suddenly jumped as he listened. He knew Yi Zhao too well. Once he decided on something, he would never change it. Now, Yi Zhao had already made up his mind to kill him, then, no matter how he begged for mercy, it was useless. When he figured this out, Yi Gong's expression suddenly became fierce. I won't choose either. His voice was sharp and hoarse, and there was even a bit of hysteria in it. Yi Zhao. I've already advised you to choose to submit to the illusory god palace. But how did you choose? It's your stubbornness that caused the entire clan to fall into this situation. Since you're not my master, how can you say that I'll submit? Anyway, you're the master of the illusory god palace, so what's the difference? Our ancestor made the wrong choice back then, and since then, our Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan has become a sinful clan of the illusory god palace. Now that you have the chance to change everything, why don't you agree? Yi Gong really couldn't figure it out. He clenched his fists, and because of his agitation, his face was abnormally red, and his eyes were filled with madness. Yi Zhao's expression didn't change, and he only said word by word, what our ancestor chose is the choice of our clan for 10,000 years. Whether we live or die, it will never be changed. Yi Gong, you colluded with foreign enemies and betrayed your own clansmen. You deserve death. I was the one who promoted you to the position of Grand Elder. I was blind to have made such a big mistake. Today, I will personally kill you. In the future, I will be able to answer to the ancestors and the clansmen. As he spoke, he raised his hand. The long period of inhumane torture had already caused him to be covered in cuts and bruises. Even his fingers were stained with blood and bruises. However, no one knew just how terrifying the power within his body was at this moment. Chi! A cluster of sparks appeared at his fingertips. Yi Gong's pupils constricted as a deep sense of fear surged into his heart. Without even thinking, he turned around and ran. However, just as he turned around and before he could take a step, a figure suddenly appeared in front of him and blocked his path. "Great Elder, where are you going?" A crisp and tender voice sounded. Dumpling was quietly floating in the air, tilting her head to look at him. Yi Gong's heart almost jumped out. "You!" Just now, he was so focused on dealing with Yi Zhao that he almost forgot that the King of Hell was behind him. Tuanzi raised her eyes slightly and looked at Yi Zhao with a sweet smile on her lips. "Grandpa Clan Leader, can you hand the Great Elder to me first?" Yi Zhao paused and then nodded slightly. However, the sparks at his fingertips did not extinguish. Clearly, as long as Yi Gong made a move, he would still attack immediately. Yi Gong looked at Dumpling and felt that the smile on her face was incomparably dangerous. His entire body stiffened. What do you want to do?" He did not forget that Dumpling had just opened her 7th meridian. Even though she was still young, in terms of strength, she could already completely crush him. Dumpling's expression was relaxed. "You will know what I want to do soon." With that, she raised her hand. Her chubby little hand was tightly gripping an ancestor's golden feather. A trace of confusion flashed through Yi Gong's eyes. However, in the next moment, he saw Dumpling bite her finger. A dark red bead of blood quickly gushed out. Then, she flicked her finger, and the bead of blood quickly flew towards Yi Gong's glabella. He instinctively wanted to dodge. However, at this moment, he was surrounded by 2 people and could not move at all. Poof! A scalding pain shot through his body. That bead of blood actually entered Yi Gong's glabella just like that. Realizing what had happened, Yi Gong's body stiffened, and then his eyes suddenly widened. Youth, Dumpling's heart stirred. Explode. As soon as he finished speaking, Yi Gong felt an indescribable majestic force instantly sweep through his entire body. Then, all the power in his body seemed to be summoned and started to surge rapidly. This movement was extremely similar to when he was about to open his meridians. Could it be? An extremely absurd guess suddenly surged into his mind. As if sensing his thoughts, Dumpling's lips curled into a brilliant smile. "Great Elder, don't you want to open your 7th meridian?" "I'll help you." She had a pure bloodline and had just opened her 7th meridian, so the bloodline power in her body was extremely abundant. With just a single bead of blood, she could instantly detonate all the bloodline power in Yi Gong's body and forcefully open his meridians. As expected. A look of shock flashed through Yi Gong's eyes. Dumpling actually wanted to help him open his meridians? What was she trying to do? Just as he was filled with panic, Dumpling's figure moved. Her pure gold lotus leaf dress swayed gently, and golden bells jingled. In the blink of an eye, she had already arrived in front of Yi Gong. Then, she held the ancestor's golden feather in her hand and stroked gently. Several patterns appeared on Yi Gong's glabella uncontrollably. He struggled with all his might, wanting to avoid Dumpling. However, how could he still be controlled at this moment? There were flames burning in Tuanzi's eyes. Open! The 7th pure gold pattern appeared slowly. Chapter 2293. Yi Gong had fantasized about opening his 7th meridian many times, but he had never imagined that it would be like this. Dumpling held the ancestor's golden feather in her hand and used a strand of her pure bloodline power to forcibly open his meridians. Every part of his body felt like it was being torn apart bit by bit, and intense pain came. Yi Gong's face was pale, and blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. He wanted to break free in a panic, but how could he do that now? His mind was almost blank, and only the burning red gold flames in front of him were scalding and terrifying. As the Grand Elder of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, he had never thought that this flame would cause him such pain one day. He wanted to call for help, but he found that his throat was tightly choked by an invisible force, and he could only bear it silently. Dumpling's eyes were shining, and the ancestor's golden feather in her hand moved slowly and firmly. A fierce and terrifying energy wave came. The heavenly lightning surged wildly and entered the dazzling flame one after another. Mu Dongyu frowned. This situation seemed a little wrong. He was about to get closer for a closer look, but the golden Tianlei suddenly surged up and wrapped around the inside tightly, making it impossible to see anything. Dongyu! A familiar voice came from behind, and Mu Dongyu immediately turned around. Second Divine Envoy. Yu Qian waved his hand, and the surrounding Tianlei seemed to be afraid and retreated. He was stronger than Mu Dongyu, so it was naturally easier for him to move here. What's going on? Yu Qian asked as he stared at the huge ball of light not far in front of him. At this moment, countless golden Tianlei were wrapped around the red-gold flames, and nothing could be seen in the dazzling light. Mu Dongyu quickly told him about what had happened. So, all three of them are inside now. Yu Qian frowned. Mu Dongyu nodded with a worried expression. Yi Zhao is the clan leader after all, and he was so determined to immolate himself. He has a strong summoning power, so it's normal for Yi Gong and Mu Dongyu to come here. However, his actions were too sudden and extremely dangerous. If he was the slightest bit careless, the remaining two would be greatly affected as well. Therefore, the most important thing now was to stop Yi Zhao. But at this moment, he had already gone mad. The flames had already burned half of the lightning pool. How difficult was it to make him stop? Yu Qian's expression was grave. Why did Yi Zhao suddenly become like this? Even Yi Zhao, who had been locked up here for so long and had suffered all kinds of torture, was not like this. I don't know what's going on today, but, Mu Dongyu shook her head. I don't know either. It's like I was suddenly stimulated by something, Yu Qian frowned. Could it be because he sensed that Dumpling had opened her 7th meridian? This was probably the only explanation. Yi Gong's life and death did not matter. Even if Yi Zhao himself died, it did not matter too much. The key was Dumpling. She had just opened her 7th meridian. Yu Qian had witnessed this process with his own eyes. He knew too well how terrifying Dumpling's bloodline power was. So now, he had to protect Dumpling no matter what. He pondered for a moment and said coldly, seal the lightning pool immediately and chase all the silver Tianlei out of this place. Only the golden Tianlei will remain. Yi Zhao had chosen to self-immolate. In the process, he would need to devour a terrifying amount of Tianlei. Only by cutting off his supply of power could they hope to stop him. However, after saying that, Mu Dongyu did not immediately take action. Instead, she revealed a somewhat troubled expression. Second Divine Envoy, this, Yu Qian's expression turned cold. Is there a problem? Of course there was. Mu Dongyu took a deep breath and braced herself to say, Second Divine Envoy, these Tianlei are no longer under my control. Yu Qian's eyebrows twitched violently. What did you say? A chill instantly surged and enveloped Mu Dongyu. Mu Dongyu's voice was hoarse. Just now, at first, it was only a small portion, but as time passed, the flames on Yi Zhao's side burned brighter and brighter, and more Tianlei became manic and crazy. At this point, he was almost completely out of control. If he still had a way, he would not be surrounded by these Tianlei and unable to approach for a long time. This lightning pool has been under your care for 10,000 years. Every Tianlei should be under your control. Now you're telling me that you can't control it. Yu Qian suddenly raised his voice, cold and stern. He had always been gentle and elegant to outsiders. Even if he was angry, he would usually have a smile on his face, which was unfathomable. At this moment, he had exploded. Obviously, he was extremely angry. Mu Dongyo's body tensed up. Her lips trembled slightly. She wanted to say something, but she realized that it was useless. Because that was the truth. After a long time, he finally spoke. Dongyu is useless. He himself did not know what was going on. It had always been fine, but now, Yu Qian clenched his fists. For tens of thousands of years, such a situation had never occurred in the lightning pool. What was going on now? Looking at Mu Dongyo's appearance, he was really angry, but now was not the time to punish Mu Dongyu. He closed his eyes, held his breath, and then raised his hands. Several streams of light flew out and quickly formed a seal in front of him. A majestic and terrifying aura faintly spread out from it. Then, he slowly pushed his hands forward. The seal instantly flew out and grew in the wind. Wherever it passed, the silver lightning bolts that were scattered all over the place seemed to be attracted and suppressed by some kind of power, and they all came over here one after another. When Chu Luyue arrived, he saw such a scene. Under the crazily burning ball of fire, there was a huge red seal floating quietly. Bolts of heavenly lightning continued to fly in that direction before they were forcefully suppressed below. Like a huge net, it gathered the surrounding Tianlei. This was the Yu Qian's work. As expected of a peerless expert above the god level. With just such a move, he easily trapped these Tianlei. His gaze turned slightly and fell on the ball of fire. The flames were blazing, and the flowing light was melting. Nothing could be seen from the outside. However, Chu Luyue and Dumpling had a contract, so he naturally knew what was happening inside. This was an excellent opportunity. As long as Dumpling could force Igong to open his meridians, the aura of these three people would become extremely similar. At that time, it would be much more convenient to do whatever he wanted. The key was that whether it was Igong opening his meridians or letting the flames continue to burn and stir up the lightning pool, they all needed an endless supply of Tianlei. But now, the Yu Qian had begun to block it. Chu Luyue pursed his lips, and then quickly rushed towards the burning ball of light, Dumpling. You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.